Good morning. Good morning. I'm so relieved that this previous session is over, that I'm all excited to be here with you. My name is Simone Steiger. I'm the program coordinator of the Multifunctional Landscapes program, and I will start this first segment of our session. And our session is called Leveraging Agroecology and Regenerative Agriculture Across Multifunctional Landscapes. So this is more science dialogue. We will talk more about science, and we really, really look forward to your comments and engagement after the presentations that we will hear. But before, I wanted to know who of you was in the session that we just had on multifunctional landscapes downstairs. Good, so that's quite a number. So we would like to have a little bit of popcorn feedback from you, really short snippets of impression you had and things perhaps that we can take forward here in this session, which is pretty much a continuity of the session we had before the break. So who would like to say a few words? And please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Schmidt-Olabisi from IATA and also Michigan State University. I really enjoyed the session and seeing the future direction for the program. One question I had was about energy. I didn't hear a lot about energy. And, you know, if Africa is going to leapfrog over fossil fuel technologies, a lot of that energy is going to be produced in rural landscapes. So how is that being integrated into the MFL program?
Good. So I do hope that my colleagues take notes and respond to that at some point. We have a question here.
Mark Graham from South Africa, Ground Truth, but working with the Kili project as well. The similar question in a way, the energy, but linked to the hydrological regime, recharge, groundwater, surface hydrology, and the ability of those multifunctional landscapes to be able to produce hydrological services, I think is also an element which I didn't hear much of this morning. Thank you.
Oh, no. Another comment?
Okay. Hi, I'm Ingrid Åborn from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Yeah, very nice to learn about the multifunctional landscape program. I was more wondering how, like, climate change adaptation, mitigation aspects, I'm sure you mean to mainstream it into it, but it wasn't very evident. And I think that's one of our main challenges. I think that should be really, really clear.
I do think we have a little bit on this today in the program. Good. So, thank you for those comments. Let's just go to the slide, Timothy. Huh? No, my slides with the program. Yes. So about this side event. So what are we here to do? As you have seen over the week, there had been a lot of submissions for side events, and we were invited to merge a lot of them. And that's how we came up with this theme of agroecology and regenerative agriculture. So today what we want to do is to talk a little bit about the principles, and we will have a short presentation on that by Oliver Oliveros. We want to showcase scientific advancements in agroecology and regenerative agriculture, and provide participants with state-of-the-art on agrobiodiversity, environmental health, and all these issues that are mentioned here. So we organized the session into 4 themes. One is more on scaling multifunctional landscape practices and principles. No problem. And it's not all the turn of Oliver, yes, yeah. And a 4th one on in situ conservation. And can we go to slide 5? Next one. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you all the speakers that we have today. We will basically take those one by one. have an introduction and a discussion for each of them. But before, I want to do an icebreaker with you. So if we can go to the slide with the... So I need you to split into 4 groups. And this will be a bit messy, but it will be nice. So I draw a line here. This is one group. I draw a line here. This is the second group. Oh no, that's not well distributed. So, so let's do this. So you can divide in 2 groups, okay? You both are the same group. You are the farm level, and I will explain you what that means. You are the farm level, and you here, all of you, you are the common pool resources. And here we have half of you are protected areas, and you are people's settlements. So you imagine yourself living in this beautiful landscape of Vietnam, okay? And we want to put yourself into the shoes of this landscape element. So at the farm level, what do you think you need to optimize to thrive in that landscape? The same at common pool resources. What do you think you need to do to thrive in a landscape? To optimize your role as protected area, what do you need? And the same for people's settlements. So you here, I divided you in twice the farm level. So you are farm level 1 and you are farm level 2. So I need to get you up as a group and have a discussion about this. And then just decide on 2 or 3 ideas that you will bring us back into the plenary. Is that possible? So let's set up and have a conversation. You just turn around perhaps. You just turn around perhaps and talk to each other. You need to come closer. You're the yes. As well, you're Is that okay? Same slide, but a word cloud. Okay, we start to wrap up. It's just an icebreaker. Just one more minute. Gosh, how do I interrupt you? That's really awful, but I have to. So let's take just a little snippet of what you need to optimize your role in this landscape. So at the farm level, one thing that you need to optimize at your role in the landscape. Put on the mic.
Just one thing.
One thing.
Yeah. So environmental conservation, or is it soil health? Yeah, soil health and biodiversity.
Soil health. Wonderful. This group, one thing you need to optimize your role.
Local knowledge and soil degradation.
Also soil, local knowledge. Let's just listen. So it was soil health and local knowledge at the farm level. You were the common pool resources. One thing you need.
Participation, involvement, and willingness of the community or the environment.
The community has to work together to make the resource a common pool resource. Here from this protected area, one thing you need. I saw you taking notes.
Yeah, okay, so we have like 10 things you need, but okay, one, I'll try to put it in one sense. Controlled access and enforcement mechanisms, local people included in the decision-making, and clear demarcation. There's like 7 other things we came up with, but.
Thank you. And the last group was the people settlements. One thing you need.
Yeah, from our group, one thing that we need is that we need to have a vision. And in this vision, we should be able to encompass different resources that we have so that we do not bring degradation. We make sure that there is inclusivity and also we ensure that there is mutual benefits from the different resources. And thank you.
Thank you very much. So if we have time, we will have a second round of the same icebreaker with a second question. But before this, just a second. So yesterday, Lulzeget had the great idea to ask a colleague to share some ideas on regenerative agriculture and agroecology. And he did it in a couple of hours and sent us an animated video, a presentation, which we will show. And I'm talking about Professor Pablo Titonel. So he's the holder of the Agroecology and Sustainable Landscape Chair at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands. And he's a senior researcher at CGIAR, and he will be joining the multifunctional landscapes team as part of our program. And so I invite you to listen to this video, which is really giving a great setting the stage for the session. Timothy.
What exactly are these nature-based solutions in the. Let me just show one example of a nature-based solution, which almost everyone knows because it's a classic. It's the push-pull system. It's a way of managing pests in an intercrop, combining maize, with a legume, in particular with desmodium, but it could be with other species as well, surrounded by napier grass. All these plants are producing signals. They're called semiochemical signals that insects, both natural enemies and pests, can actually detect, and they act as a consequence of that. And that creates a natural regulation, right? Attracts, repels, etc. Well, we know it works, and it is very well known how it works, right? But especially works very well under experimentation. But we can also, when you take this to the reality of farmers, where there is a lot of plant diversity there, and also a lot of insect diversity, then there are also a lot of molecules moving around there, a lot of signals, right? So perhaps many of the signals that are necessary for the push-pull system to exist, function, are already in the landscape. So with this question, Judith Quevede developed a thesis some time ago in Lake Hawassa, in the highlands of southern Ethiopia. And she selected around Lake Hawassa 3 types of landscape. A very simple one, the one you see on the western side of the picture.
Just starting again because it wasn't synchronized.
What exactly are these nature-based solutions in the realm of food and agriculture? Well, there are several tools, approaches, practices that can be all put under the umbrella term nature-based solutions. Here we have some, regenerative agriculture, agroecology, holistic grazing, ecological intensification, but we could also, have more, like, for example, organic farming, permaculture, syntropic farming, natural farming, etc., etc. Of course, there are lots of discussions and debates and different definitions of these terms, but some of them are more comprehensive. Like, for example, agroecology has a very comprehensive definition that includes ecological aspects, but also social aspects, and it includes already the principles of other approaches, for example, regenerative farming or circular farming. Let me just show one example of a nature-based solution, which almost everyone knows because it's a classic. It's the push-pull system. It's a way of managing pests in an intercrop, combining maize with a legume, in particular with desmodium, but it could be with other species as well, surrounded by napier grass. All these plants are producing signals. They're called semiochemical signals that insects, both natural enemies and pests, can actually detect, and they act as a consequence of that. And that creates a natural regulation, right? Attracts, repels, etc. Well, we know it works, and it is very well known how it works, right? But especially works very well under experimental conditions, right? When you take this to the reality of farmers, where there is a lot of plant diversity there, and also a lot of insect diversity, then there are also a lot of molecules moving around there, a lot of signals, right? So perhaps many of the signals that are necessary for the push-pull system to exist, function, are already in the landscape. So with this question, Judith Quevede developed a thesis some time ago in Lake Hawassa, in the highlands of southern Ethiopia. And she selected around Lake Hawassa 3 types of landscape. A very simple one, the one you see on the western side of the picture, dominated by maize fields. More diverse landscape south of Hawassa town, south of the lake. And if you go to the east side of the picture, you see a much more complex landscape, and she also found some farms there. Every number there you see there on the map is a single farm, and on each of those farms, Judith installed push-pull systems like the one I showed before, and monitored them, evaluated them. So, well, what she found basically is that in the simple landscape, the level of damage, which is measured through the length of tunneling, because this is an insect, it's called the stem borer. It's an insect that eats through the stem, within the stem of maize, creates a tunnel. So the length of the tunnel is the level of damage. We see that with or without push-pull system, you will have high levels of damage in a simple landscape. In an intermediate landscape, you see a significant difference between maize, which at the end there is single maize, as compared to the two push-pull systems. And in the complex landscape, there is no difference. Not even the sole maize has problems, right? That means that the whole landscape is acting as a push-pull system, right? And we know that, we know why, because basically more diversity in that landscape means less pest management in general, and also more diversity means more natural enemies, right? So we can explain ourselves this situation. But you know, this illustrates that when we look at natural regulations, which are important in the field of agroecology, in the field of nature-based solutions, we cannot ignore the landscape context, right? We can, if we just run an experiment, we can conclude that push-pull works or doesn't. But if we don't know where we are in the landscape, we don't understand why it works or it doesn't, right? So this is important. And so nature-based solutions, agroecology requires landscape level approaches, because many of these regulations, many of these processes, they don't stop at the boundaries of a farm. They operate at the landscape level. But also it counts for the social processes, not just for the ecological process. So if we are to illustrate how farming and biodiversity can come together on a landscape level, I like to use this analogy, the idea of how societies organize themselves. We have societies in which tolerance is very important, and people, different groups of people, they tolerate each other. They don't necessarily love each other, but they tolerate each other. But if we want to take it a step further, we want to reach a multicultural society. And if we want to go even further, what we want is a real integration, right? Well, this analogy can be used to describe how farming and biodiversity can coexist in a landscape. And so we have the lowest level, which is tolerance, which is nature-inclusive agriculture, which is basically intensive farming with some patches of nature, which are not necessarily connected to each other. If we move a bit further, we have nature-intensive fields and farms. So we can find farms in these landscapes, which are really very nature-intensive. But of course, there are islands of nature intensity within conventional farming, right? And where we want to get is here, is to nature-driven agricultural landscapes, which nature drives agricultural production through ecosystem services. And this is where the concept of nature-based solutions is really, can be really realized. So I hope these ideas are a little bit useful for the debate. And again, sorry for not being here, but thanks for letting me participate in this way.
Good. So thank you, Pablo, even if you're not online right now. We can you go to the slide? Yes. So the first theme of today is scaling multifunctional landscape practice and principles. And to start, we have a colleague online, which is Oliver Oliveros. He is the coordinator of the Agroecology Coalition. And we are really thrilled to have you, Oliver. Do you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
So I know you will talk about about the potential of the principles to leverage the multifunctional landscapes. If you want to make a comment on Pablo's presentation, it's also really welcome. So we're listening to you. Thank you for being with us.
No, thanks very much for the opportunity to also speak a little bit to you about the principles of agroecology, which nicely builds on what Pablo has just presented as well. And I'll just share my screen just so it's always useful to have some visuals to help us. All right, can you see my screen?
Your screen, it's not in slideshow mode. Yes, perfect.
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, so this is essentially just a reminder, a refresher in terms of what those principles are. And basically, we all know that the current food systems are not sustainable, right? They produce about 1/3 of the greenhouse gases, responsible for 80% biodiversity losses, uses up to 70% of freshwater resources, polluting the air, soil, and water, vulnerable to climate change. We all talk about this now. Do not address the triple burden of malnutrition. And most importantly, or of equal importance, is that there is still social inequity and loss of cultural values. And at the same time, there's a need to address these simultaneous challenges of climate, biodiversity, land, nutrition crisis in ways that are far more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. And this is actually where agroecology comes in. And Pablo already alluded to this one and many other different framings, let's say. And that I'm also delighted because you already mentioned during your icebreaker some of the feedback on the various things that you would want to do or should be considered as you address farm level, landscape, settlements, etc. And we really look at agroecology as a pathway for food systems transformation. So the big picture is really food systems transformation. And it can indeed be a pathway because it's an integrated and transformative and simultaneously applies ecological and social concepts and principles in the design and management of a food and agriculture system, providing sufficient, healthy, diverse foods for consumption and livelihoods. And it's also seen as an approach for climate mitigation and adaptation that reduces climate risks while supporting long-term productivity and resilience of food systems by, again, applying those ecological and humanistic principles. And we are at this moment where agroecology is really gaining a momentum and recognition in the recent decade as a potent catalyst to address different challenges head-on, from climate to biodiversity to desertification and many others at different levels, from global, regional, subnational, with countries and the counties coming up with their respective agroecology strategy. And there is also a growing body of evidence, both in terms of publication and in practice. And we'll all be further deep diving into this in the session in a couple of hours. And we also know, and Pablo already mentioned this to a certain extent as well, that agroecology offers a different paradigm. It is, as we say it in the movement, a science, a practice, and a social movement rolled into one. As a social movement, agroecology has arisen in response to agrarian crisis and operated with efforts to initiate widespread change to agriculture and food systems. It has become an overarching political framework under which many social movements, especially smallholders, peasant organizations around the world, assert their collective rights and advocate for a diversity of locally adopted agriculture and food systems anchored on the right to food and food sovereignty framing. And as a practice, agroecology is seen as modified or adapted practices or techniques that contribute to a more environmentally friendly or biodiversity friendly, ecological, organic, or alternative agriculture. It recognizes and builds on traditional and indigenous agricultural practices. It includes, among others, organic matter management, resource conservation, biodiversity and territorial management, spatial planning, biological pest management, the push-pull that Pablo has mentioned, and soil fertility enhancing techniques. And as transdisciplinary science, it combines different disciplines in finding solutions to real-world problems, working in partnership with multiple and often local stakeholders, considering their local knowledge and cultural values in a reflective and iterative way that fosters co-learning that among researchers and practitioners, as well as horizontal spread of knowledge amongst farmers themselves or with other stakeholders across the value chain or the value network. Initially focusing on a field level farming practices, it has since expanded to include landscape scale processes, including social science and political ecology in an effort to ensure sustainable and equitable food systems. So agroecology stands on a set of principles as defined and elaborated by the high-level panel of experts of the World Committee on Food Security that are fully aligned as well with the 10 elements of agroecology as adopted by 197 member states of the Food and Agriculture Organization. These principles shape the transformation pathways towards sustainable food systems. For instance, by improving resource efficiency guided by the principles of recycling and reducing dependence on external and chemical inputs. By strengthening resilience, you have there the principles of soil health. We've heard about it earlier, animal health, biodiversity, synergy, as well as economic diversification. And then by securing as well social and social equity and responsibility based on the principles of fairness, connectivity, participation, social values, and diets, governance, and then the important aspect of co-creation. Obviously, these principles apply to all forms of agriculture and food production, including crop, livestock and pastoral systems, agroforestry, fisheries, aquaculture, etc. So, agroecology is also site-specific. It factors in local biophysical and ecological conditions and local socio-cultural contexts. Now, these principles should be taken all together, as these are inherently integrated and synergistic and offer pathways that generate co-benefits. It greatly enhances agricultural biodiversity and in multiple benefits, including better nutrition. It promotes social justice and recognizes and uplifts indigenous peoples, their knowledge and practices, nurturing local identity and culture. And it strengthens the economic viability of the farm while promoting fair working conditions that honor and ensure the dignity of people involved in food systems, especially those who are historically marginalized, including women, youth, indigenous peoples, smallholders, fisherfolk, refugees in some cases, and food system workers. So strategies and planning for implementing agroecological approaches at different scales from local, territorial, national, regional, or global can help achieve this fundamental transformation of food systems by ensuring policy coherence across sectors, agriculture, environment, health, gender, education, energy, environment, and involving all relevant actors through consultative and multi-stakeholder process. These principles serve as a compass in navigating the complexities of food systems transformation. So I hope this reminds us of the efforts in the way multifunctional landscapes could be designed, and can this really be guided by this set of principles. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Oliver. Please stay a moment and we see if we have questions or comments from the audience. Who wants to? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Jeroen Groot, Wageningen University, the Netherlands. Yeah, I want to respond to both previous speakers, basically. And in particular, Pablo Titanel talked about nature-driven agriculture and landscapes. I think there are two big challenges that we have and have to face, I think. One is that within the system and also the push-pull, for instance, there's a lot of variability. And so you're never sure whether it really happens. And basically the question is, how do we deal with it? And how does that interact also with the climate change uncertainty that we get? So that's a big question, I think. Another thing is that if we really want to be nature-driven, then we also have to follow the principles of nature. And I think that links also to the productivity that we expect from our system. And so there's still also, for instance, in sustainable farming, a lot of attention for yield gaps, for instance. And so you look at a potential yield, but I think that a sustainable yield will be much lower, about 50% or maybe even lower than that. So there's also, yeah, a big issue to address, I think. And I think that there's one escape, that is restoration. So if you restore soils, etc., then you can, increase your area of cultivation. But I think this is also an important research question that we have to address. So I also wonder what the speaker thinks about it.
Oliver, do you want to
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally
Response?
agree with the comment that has been made. I mean, the limit, the concept of carrying capacity comes to mind. And I think this is really important that the nature and the environment can only absorb so much, and we should listen to the science of nature, right? And that is that concept of carrying capacity is, I think, is important element to factor in, not only in terms of nature, but also capacity of the people around the area, especially as you look at a landscape level, right? So I totally agree with the point around looking at, you know, what what is the sustainable yield, and it factors in obviously the concept around restoration, and that's why it reminds me of the conversations and the debate in CBD around the 70-30 ratio in terms of what should be protected and what should be cultivable. It continues to be a sort of like a debate, but I think in the research as what you will be doing, I think this is really important element to factor in and further study as well.
Thank you. Both agroecology, nature positive, or regenerative, whatever we call, got a temporal change in the whole ecosystem. Now, things will change on time in terms of soil and water, environment, biodiversity, everything. So from a temporal perspective, how we keep those nature positive or agroecological solutions dynamic, and how we are capturing that dynamicity over time.
Oliver?
And that's an interesting research question, indeed. How do you capture the temporal dynamics of change? One of the things I think you will be discussing that at a certain extent is the metrics part. And I remember in one of the presentations in last week, was it in Nairobi during the East African Agroecology Conference, there was a side event that was organized on precisely on the issue around metrics. And that is also one of the points. To what extent are we capturing the temporal aspects of it? I don't have a response to this one, but I think this is an important element that needs to be factored in and studied over time. And this is where I think that tracking tool needs to be developed in terms of how are we seeing and how are we seeing the trajectory of the applications of different agroecological practices and approaches, and whether or not, you know, yield continues over time. What we are seeing, for example, in the case of Andhra Pradesh, was the nature farming experience that they've had was a product of several decades of practice and application. So they follow essentially a natural farming, listening to nature, following approaches and the like. So I think it's really an important element to look into, and different landscapes respond to different levels of farming approaches. So I think this is an important factor to look into, and looking at local knowledge, indigenous peoples, and how they look at things and how they were practicing sustainable farming is an important consideration to look into as well. So what is the anthropology of these practices, and how do we look into those traditional practice and agriculture practices that allows themselves to sustain and practice sustainable ways of doing things in such a way that does not necessarily exploit their natural resource base. Over.
So thank you very much. Is there a last question? There are two. Christine, how are we doing on time? I'm not sure. Very good. Okay.
My name is Jonathan Mokshaw, and I think those two lovely presentations really set it very well. But I seem a bit confused. I hear Pablo talk about nature-based solutions. And then Olivier talks about agroecology. I'm wondering, are there some farmers in the room? So if there are some farmers, which of these different approaches is of most important to you? Or do we have too many labels? And I'm just wondering, will that be a value proposition for why we need a multifunctional landscape?
So I know that we have farmers in the room. So your question is, which of the two makes more sense to them? You're a farmer?
Good morning. My name is Caleb Bayaki. I'm a farmer. I grow tomatoes, castor in the arid areas of Kenya. Now, on both frontiers, it depends on the landscape. As a farmer, I have to take two things in order. One, an agroecological practice. Then two, I do a nature-based solution. Based on one, if it is raining, there are nature-based solutions that have to be in place before now I grow my crop. Now, once the crop is grown, now I input the agroecological practices that is coupled with regenerative practices so that I ensure that I'm able to get my crop yield.
Thank you. We have farmers here as well, I know. Who wants to talk with you?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm a small scale farmer and we practice mixed farming. We are not specific on one crop. So both of the practices apply, but it also depends on where you are. Because nature-based may be very good where the environment is convenient, because you can be able to grow like if it is trees, they can grow, you can do all the other practices. But you'll also go to the agroecology, it favors the other side of farming that you are practicing. So I would really not go for one or the other, but we use both depending on what you are doing. Thank you.
There was a last, yeah? You have your mic.
I have my mic here. Thank you. My name is Gabriel Odwong. I was during the icebreaker. I was in the farm level group. I want to talk as a farmer. Actually, it's just a harmony, and I agree with my two predecessors who talked about this. The harmony between agroecological planning and nature positive planning. And the two go hand in hand together so well. Ecological planning, if I could give an example of probably our farms as they are in CGIAR, and I talk of probably a riparian area, right? Land bordering a riparian zone. There are definitely things that you'll need to ecologically plan for it, maybe a vetiver barrier, bamboo barrier, and also the kind of probably trees for agroforestry you want to embed in it. But when it comes to nature-based solution, the same land, you can also do apiculture in the same to actually add on what you're calling the productivity of that single landscape. So my point is the two can actually get practiced together. Thank you.
Great. We have a last question before we move on. Or comment.
I am microphone. Yep. Eligible International University Network on Biodiversity and Cultural Diversity. Going beyond the debate, 13 principles, 10 elements we know very well, deeply. We should enrich, add values to this view. There is a need to address policy and management issues. In a few words, we need to include or add all the issues related to community participation. Agroecology is an holistic, intersectorial view. It is impossible to implement agroecology without addressing all the dimensions of society and policy. And of course, we need absolutely participation, empowerment, what we can call as international network, community policy capacity, community policy empowerment, community policy and management active participation.
Oliver, why don't you make a comment on that and then we close and say goodbye to you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree on this important thing. I mean, participation, co-creation, fairness, governance, these are all central elements of agroecology, and a number of different food systems framings and approaches also to a certain extent share those things as well. So the centrality of people in the process is really key, and this is how agroecology, for instance, came into being, right? Particularly in the Latin America, it was an expression of emancipation of farmers, particularly smallholders, in the issue around agrarian reform in Latin America, which spread across the world, and that continues to be the motivation of many social movements who are part of the agroecology movement, no, around food sovereignty and right to food, etc. But also from the nature and biodiversity perspective, I mean, within the CBD, for example, there is already now a recognition of agroecology and other innovative approaches as a biodiversity-friendly practice. It's also, to a certain extent, framed as a nature-based solution. So I think it doesn't really matter what language we use, if we could use that loosely, as long as we have those 13 principles or the 10 elements, whatever we call it, that really guides us the way we implement things, the centrality of people, having respect on local culture, looking at the carrying capacity of nature, and basically, recognizing the importance of food system actors. These are pathways that allow us to really guide towards the transformation that we would like to see. So thanks very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing the outputs of the conversation today. Thanks very much, and have a good day.
Thank you, and let's give an applause to Oliver.
Thank you.
So, in the session this morning, Guy Faure, from the European Union, he mentioned the importance of scaling these site-specific solutions that we want to develop in the multifunctional landscapes. And we have two presentations now that deal with that topic. So, Emedjat, if you would like to come over, or you want to speak from your place. So you're the Global Research Program Director of Resilient Farm and Food Systems at EquiSat, and we have the pleasure to have him in our multifunctional landscapes team in area of work 7 of global engagement and learning. So I hand over to you.
Thank you, Simone. I don't know how many slides I have, but 2, 3. They're not there.
You can look here.
Okay. Thank you. Some experience from India, especially on the landscape approach, the regenerative landscape approach. That's what we bring in. Can you change? Can you go to the next slide, please? Next. Yeah, so from EquiSat's perspective, and when I say EquiSat, it's inclusive of all of us. You're all part of that. We take landscape approach. We've been working over watershed, so it's 50 years of the work. And in that context, our approach is restoration and intensification. And in that process, when we design the landscape, we take the approach of land resource inventory and hydrology to design the interventions. So from our perspective, when we talk about landscapes, water is the entry point. And I think water is central. Without conservation of the water, we cannot think of other, whatever, agroecological or nature positive solutions we talk about. The second one is on disaster risk management. My colleague, Gijao, sitting on back, doing a lot of work in Ethiopia on unlocking those flood farming opportunities and climate smart practices on those landscapes. The third approach, what we work on, is taking agroecological approach at farm to landscape, innovations for building the systems level resilience. The fourth one, what we integrate is soil health, nutrient management, agrobiodiversity, and there are a lot of work going on in Ethiopia, for example. Again, Gijo is sitting there using the landscape segmented nutrient management. And I don't know how many of you were there in the sustainable farming launch session where he made a presentation, a specific use case on landscape segmented nutrient management, digital innovations. The fourth one is on the water secured landscapes. So designing those water budget based cropping systems. It's not only the conservation of the water, but how to make best use of the water for crops, for horticulture, for livestock, for agroforestry, and all those aspects. And the next step, what we take is the social learning and the innovation platforms using those landscapes. And finally, we connect it to, next one, is scaling the partnership, the sphere of influence using all the science evidence what we generate on the landscape level. Next, please. And then on bottom of it, all those accelerators sitting, digital innovation, gender, youth, social inclusion, capacity development across that entire agri-food systems value chain at the landscape scale. Next, please. Now, when we talk about, it's not moving mine, or I can move. Okay. So we take this holistic resource conservation approach for transforming the dryland landscapes. And the approach what we take, you see this framework for integration of the land resource inventory and hydrology for improving the natural resource conservation. And in that context, we use the LRI, the database development. The second one is on quantifying the hydrology, the water budget aspects. The third one is the designing the interventions and preparing the full landscape level program on that. And finally, the execution of the landscape and the field scale or the farm scale interventions into that. So we use those characterization of the landscape, the water budget, the designing of the in situ, ex situ, as I said, what is the entry point. Then we bring the diversification and intensification of the cropping system. We bring the soil health element. And in all those landscapes, we have all the state-of-art instrumentation for monitoring the hydrology every day, every minute, every second. The water tables are monitored at maybe 200 places. And then we build the capacity of the stakeholders using all those approaches. Next one, please, last one. Okay, so this is kind of evidence on impact of the regenerative landscapes in India, using the integration of LRI and hydrology for planning, designing of those natural resource management interventions, water budget-based cropping systems, integration of the cost-effective innovative engineering and biological measures. And we work, so this is a map of India, and you can see all those blue areas are our landscapes, the learning landscapes. So we work in the 7 agroecological areas of India. It's very diverse. The areas which got 400 to 1500 millimeters of rainfall. The landscape size varies from 100 hectare to 28,000 hectare, and they are all living landscapes. We are covering around 150,000 households on those landscapes and 100,000 hectare area of the landscape. So it's a fairly large. The evidence what we got is farmers' income went by 3x. That's in general. Somewhere 4x, somewhere 2x, but on an average 3x. We have seen the cropping intensity went up from 110% to 180%. So there's sustainable intensification happening. The water tables in many of those vulnerable areas have came up from 28 meters up to 4.5 meters. So it's not only intensification, but also bringing water table, regenerating the water, groundwater there. We have seen the base flow enhancement by 150% because you are bringing the perenniality of the system through all the landscape design, and which is something very, very important for permanence of the water. The ecosystem services in terms of the greenhouse gas emission, the biodiversity, all those aspects what we are monitoring, there's a lot of positive impact on that. And what we have seen in those regions, there are a lot of migration happening. Even though farmers got land, sizable land, but there is no employment opportunity, there is no livelihood opportunity, so they are out migrating to the slums and cities, but we have seen they are coming back to their landscapes and doing farming. A lot of land degradation arresting happening and the sustainable intensification of even the degraded fallow lands. At the same time, we are using this as a policy informing, the science-led policy, and there is a policy buy-in where we are advising Government of India in rolling out a larger program in 12 states. So I think that's a buy-in, and we see the potential for impact. And if you see the multifunctional landscape target, those can be achieved right there. And for this work, we were also, there's a testimony, we were given this UNDP Mahatma Award 2023 for biodiversity conservation. So this is one example I wanted to bring. You all are welcome to bring. There is plenty of work to do on those landscapes, and we can build on those landscapes and do something great to inform rest of the community. There's a lot of South-South learning happening. We had a delegation of Uganda visiting those landscapes, got excited, they want to replicate, all across. There are other countries. Thank you so much.
So we will take a second presentation and then we will have a discussion and be also prepared for each theme. So we are still in the first theme. A couple of questions to trigger the conversation. So I would like to invite Salome, and Salome knows that we all say only Salome. 5 minutes? And you will be talking about creating livelihoods, inclusive business models, and novel applied financial innovations, which is also related to one of our areas of work in the program.
Thank you, Simone. So in this session, we will be touching on the business models and market mechanisms, which is also coming from the initiatives, but which will also continue to the science program, to the multifunctional science program. Now, this is our approach. So we work in different settings. So in this presentation, my focus will be on circular economy, which is one of the key components of the agroecological and nature positive principles. So how we work and where we work and what is our approach. We work in urban and peri-urban areas, especially with circular economy, which also addresses the increase in urbanization, increase in population growth. We look at different models addressing the challenges that are associated with urbanization. So we look at circular economy business models that are suitable for these settings. We also work in smallholder rural farming communities, now also in multifunctional landscapes, to enable nature positive and agroecological principles to enhance food security, resilience, and also create sustainable livelihoods. Another area where we work is also in the FCM setting, or we call the fragile and conflict affected areas in the humanitarian setting. There is a great opportunity there to bring science to those difficult situations. This is also linked to one of the science programs, FFS, which is Food Frontiers and Systems, where we look at nature positive solutions, circular economy, particularly circular water and food and energy systems in those settings. We work in different countries. How do we do that? Our approach is we assess first the investment climate, the enabling environment for circular economy in different countries. We have done feasibility assessments in more than 15 countries. We also co-design business models with different communities, private sector entities, and so on. So we pilot and facilitate circular economy innovations and businesses in those settings. Capacity building is also a core aspect of our work. We collaborate with universities, with municipalities. We provide trainings on different waste management and circular economy aspects. Lastly, also, we co-implement through innovative business models and partnership models. So this is in a nutshell our approach. Now I'll be presenting two cases from our Nature Positive Solutions initiative, which could also be taken up or scaled up in this science program, in the multifunctional landscape science program. So in Kenya, we have a business model for animal feed, which we call as the black soldier fly, community-led black soldier fly. This is in Kisumu, in one of our sites in Agoro. We have co-designed BSF model for the community. This is actually part of an aggregated nature positive farm model where we have different enterprises, and one of the enterprises is a circular economy enterprises, and we have this black soldier fly pilot plant. You are welcome to visit it. It's a good system that we are setting up there. In this regard, we first co-designed the business model with the community. Most of the farmers, they have livestock. They keep at least poultry. Some of them have also fish. So they were looking for alternative animal feed, which are low cost and which they can also produce themselves. Now, in this regard, I just put also small data on this businesses. It just started 10 months ago, so it's not fully operational. So far they are able to at least process 30 tons of market waste a year, and they are producing about 3 tons of BSF larvae per year. And they are also able to sell the larvae, although the selling price could be higher. We looked at the market price, but they are now selling it at a lower price to penetrate the market. And also they are able to generate a small income. So mind you, this is only at a pilot, but it's also a practical site where we also do capacity building, hands-on capacity building of the communities. Next one is an energy business model. There was a question on multifunctional landscape. Science program is not touching on energy. We do that within the circular economy work. This is also women-led circular economy model where we have different value creation such as biochar in India and also briquette model in Kenya. This is this is a model where we have a group of women are producing briquettes for sales. This is also operational. It's also in Kisumu. It was also featured as one of the inclusive business models within the gender impact platform of the CGIAR. And these women, they are also able to process some tons of waste per year. They mostly use also agricultural residue where they collect from the urban centers. They are able also to generate income. Our intervention was to build their capacity. They were already in business, but they were producing rudimentary briquettes, so we built their capacity, and we also organized them as a cooperative, and now they are also operational. Next slide, please. Innovation Hub is one of our ways of scaling. So we have innovation hubs in different countries. In Ghana, we are collaborating with the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources. In India, it's BIF, it's an NGO. And in Vietnam, we collaborate with UNDP for these innovation hubs. Next slide, please. Just to mention also, the Innovation Hub was also featured as one of the innovations in the CGIAR flagship report, which was launched yesterday night. And finally, our accelerator programs. We work from communities, from farm communities, and also to at national level, we have done incubator and accelerator programs. This was in collaboration with Accelerate for Impact, and also in the Agroecology initiative. We also collaborated with UU initiatives. This is Kwama initiative where we have circular economy for Colombia, and also agri-tech for Kenya. So this is like a national level innovation challenge where we had more than 300 young innovators. And the idea is to take them through bootcamp to see that the innovation comes from incubation to fruition into market. We also work in schools, school programs, specifically in Ghana, where we are training grassroots to incorporate waste source separation as well as recycling aspects. Finally, I think I have one slide. Just to conclude, the idea is now to take this into the multifunctional landscapes. We need supportive business models. We need to co-design business models, not only at farm, but also at community and at landscape level. We also need innovative financing schemes. We need to explore blended financing schemes to ensure that these models are scaled up. And through the innovation hubs, where we have in different countries, the South-South knowledge sharing will also be possible, especially in multifunctional landscape programs. We have Area of Work 7, which Cargill and MLJAT are leading. These innovation hubs could be a platform to do the South-South learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome. So we had a couple of questions to get feedback from you on what we just heard. Let's skip the first paragraph here because we talked with Oliveros already a little bit about the principles. But from what you heard in this presentation, and also just the last comments from Salome, what do you think are these enabling conditions, the mechanisms, the partnerships that we need to scale these solutions and to make multifunctional landscapes really multifunctional? So around this scaling question, specifically when we talk about working in small territories, in these living landscape, living labs, innovation hubs, how do we scale from these innovations that we co-create and that are local to a higher level? Who wants to address that question? No? Yes.
I never like a silence. My name is Phil Stevenson. I'm from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. I got quite excited about the last talk where you were incorporating a business approach. And I think often we do need to work perhaps more with the private sector to ensure there is sustainability in some of the approaches that we're taking. So that's one thing that can help. One thing that we use in our work in Tanzania and Malawi to increase uptake is farmer research networks, which were mentioned in the plenary yesterday. These are where you have essentially co-creation from the outset from farm leads who represent larger groups of farmers. So that's another way of increasing the reach with the limited resources that we have.
Other common farmer networks? Yes.
Hello all, my name is Michael Wayaki from Miti Alliance. Something that I see working for us is, I like the last presenter aspect of working with schools. I feel some of these things need to start being introduced in the curriculum in the simplest way possible. Like we have an environmental curriculum that we run with the kids while setting up kitchen gardens. And as simple as it can be, the kids also have suggestions, amazing suggestions of what they eat, what they grow, what they know does well in their community. And I feel as we work on this, whether it is in Ghana, whether it is in Kenya, Ethiopia, there are certain aspects where maybe the Ministry of Education through the CBC, and there's classes on environmental classes, there's agricultural classes, these aspects and concepts can be introduced in a very simple way that kids now begin to understand and also practice in their own homes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think let's take a last comment here. You can use your mic.
Thank you. My name is Maurits. I'm from the True Price Foundation. In terms of applicability of these principles, I like the principles and the 10 other guiding elements. I think if you really want to make it applicable, especially in the light also of the last presentation, bringing it into innovative business models, bringing in private sector actors, etc. These principles, I think, should be made more tangible and more consistently measurable in a way that you can actually measure progress coherently, and also compare on several levels, of course, the effects, the impacts of the interventions, of the innovations that you do. So that was a bit of input on that.
That was a perfect linkage to the next section, and I think we need to go on. But before we start the next section, I just wanted everybody to stand up because we have this long session, and we all need to hang in here for a while. So let's just stand up a bit and get ready for the next theme. Thank you. Should I go?
Oh, are you gonna?
You stretch whatever you want to do, but wake up.
Sawa sawa. No, she's not going to present. Oh, all right. You can sit down. Thanks for those hanging out at the window. We appreciate your perseverance. Great. On to the next slide. This is theme 2, evidence for success. We heard a little bit about it this morning in the plenary session on the stakeholder dialogue. So our mission at CGIAR is to deliver science and innovation that advances positive transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. And in the multifunctional landscapes program, we really want to steer our eco-agri-food system towards sustainable solutions for the people and the planet. But how do we deliver impactful evidence at the landscape scale? We, of course, need metrics, indicators, and thresholds to evaluate multifunctional landscape performance. So in this brief session, we're going to talk about the importance of measuring what matters for multifunctional landscapes and some different ways to do so. We'll give you some brief snapshots from the agroecology and the nature positive solutions initiatives of CGIAR. But those evidence streams are mostly at household and farm level. With the multifunctional landscapes program, we want to shift from field and farm level attention to coordinated actions at the landscape level, and from more of a productivity-centered approach to more holistic and environmentally sustainable and systems-based approaches. So in this session, we want to consider how we expand to the landscape level and get better evidence for success for the stakeholders that we're working with. And we'll have a discussion after our session as well. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to introduce myself. I'm Kristen Davis. I'm a senior research fellow with the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI. And I worked on the Nature Positive Solutions Initiative. Here's just a little snapshot from our baseline data collection. So we collected socioeconomic condition data and ag systems data in Colombia, India, Kenya, and Vietnam. There's some little QR codes at the end of the slideshow. You can download the reports. But here is just a snapshot of the adoption intensity for the 4 countries on nature positive practices, things like restoration, sustainable inputs, conservation and agrobiodiversity, native livestock and animal feed, rural waste recycling, and integrated natural resource management. What we mean by adoption intensity is the count of distinct nature-based practices that a farmer or household reports adopting. And this metric really serves as a proxy for the depth and the breadth of engagement with nature-based solutions in farm management. So you see here we have the low adopters, which are households reporting just up to 1 nature-based practice. That's the blue color. So you can see for the different countries the size of the blue, low adopters. The medium group in red is households using 2 or 3 nature-based practices. And then a high adoption group in green, those that use 3 or more practices. Basically, overall, we see relatively low adoption in Kenya and India, relatively high adoption in Colombia and Vietnam. We also have some gender results as well, but we did see significant disparities in assets ownership, land ownership, decision-making, and income generation by sex in India, Kenya, and Vietnam, whereas in Colombia, we saw quite a bit of joint decision-making. And you can find out more about that in our reports. Next slide. And just a very quick snapshot of true cost accounting. We have some true cost friends in the room here that we've been engaging with. But basically, we looked at two countries, Kenya and Vietnam. What is the true cost of crop production in the nature positive sites in these countries? So you can see these pie charts at the top are the structure of true costs of crop production. So the yellow are the direct costs, your inputs and your labor. And the red is the social costs. And the green is the environmental costs. So you can see the pie charts there. They're relatively the same. But when we unpack the sources of external costs in Kenya and Vietnam, we can see here in Kenya, higher sort of social costs. This was forced labor and child labor, things like that. Whereas in Vietnam, the environmental costs showed up as relatively more important than the social costs, things like land occupation and soil degradation. There's a lot of reports and resources on these these studies as well. So I welcome you to look for our website. I'm going to turn it over to Matthias now to continue on with the evidence for success. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. My name is Matthias Geck. I work for C4ICROF just across the fence, and I coordinate the Agroecology Transformative Partnership Platform, or TPP. So I'll tell you just very, very briefly what kind of incoming evidence we have from the Agroecology initiative into multifunctional landscapes. There's plenty more, so I decided I'll just focus on one tool. Many of you may be familiar with the tool for agroecology performance evaluation, or TAPE. This is a similar one that also on farm level assesses the performance specifically of agroecology. So to your question, very concretely measuring how agroecological something is and how that relates to performance. The special thing about this tool called HOLPA, Holistic Localized Performance Assessment Tool for Agroecology, is this letter L, localized, because we're all very aware that every agricultural and food system is very context specific. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution for measuring agroecology and its performance. Hence, we thought it's really important to balance that need for global evidence through KPIs that are assessed everywhere around the globe with the need for locally relevant information collected through inclusively decided upon local indicators. So that's what this tool does. In the global aspect, it has an aspect of to which degree are the 13 principles of agroecology integrated, then what is the context of assessment, which then also allows us to do adoption studies, etc. The work is ongoing. And then 4 themes of performance with a total of 18 performance main themes and indicators in it. Now, we've applied this tool in nearly 2,000 farming households of the landscapes where the Agroecology initiative worked. That is in Peru, in Senegal, in Burkina Faso, in Tunisia, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in India, and in Laos. And luckily, most of these landscapes will also be continuously working on in the multifunctional landscape initiative science program. So we'll continue engaging on these data as we move forward. Now, just if you could go to the next slide, Timothy, please. Just a very quick snapshot on what we're getting on the global level in terms of results. We can see quite clearly that across the agricultural, economic, environmental, and social domains of performance, there is a trend towards higher performance when the 13 principles of agroecology are better integrated. But it is a trend only, and particularly when we look at the social aspects, the difference is very small. According to the indicators we used, most farming households actually have quite high social performance indices, not so much so in the agricultural, economic, environmental, and particularly in the economic, we can see a very clear trend. More agroecological, better economic performance, which is contrary to the general narrative, agroecology is good for the environment, but not for the economy. It's quite the opposite, what we're seeing. However, that is a non-causative analysis, right? So it doesn't tell us whether farmers who become more agroecological have a higher economic performance, or if it might tell us the opposite. Farmers who are better well off economically are actually able to afford a higher degree of agroecological integration. Next slide, please, Timothy. Thank you. Wow, you're a mind reader, man. Amazing. Super. So what does that look like in a bit more detail? Now looking also at the countries and the specific indicators, we can see that there's a general trend once again for better performance for more agroecological farms. So every time when there's a plus here, when there's a positive number here, and particularly when there's asterisks behind it, we have a significant correlation between performance in that theme and agroecologicalness, so to speak. So we can see that on the environmental domains here, on the economic domains, etc., we're seeing a very strong correlation. More agroecological, better performance, but it's not like agroecology is a one-size-fits-all solution. We can see some aspects, particularly in Burkina Faso, where certain aspects are actually negatively correlated. So you integrate agroecology to an advanced degree, but your performance is lower. And interestingly, that is particularly the case for farmers' agency. And that is a shocking result for everybody engaging in agroecology, because we always feel agroecology is all about building agency, empowering farmers. And what do we see in reality? The opposite. So I think these kind of things really need us to reflect carefully on what we're preaching and seeing what we can change about these rather negative findings, I would say. Now, the remaining, I don't know how many minutes, I think we're probably over time already. I would just like to briefly dedicate to a bit more of a deep dive on what we're now planning to do in what is area of work 6 on evidence and performance assessments in the multifunctional landscape science program. Some of you might have heard a bit more about it in the morning. I think about half of you raised the hand when Simona asked who joined us at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thanks for all of those who got up early and managed to find your way through traffic. So first of all, in multifunctional landscapes, we're bringing things together. And therefore, we do not want to just develop a new tool. We could develop whole on landscape level. No, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is create the one-stop go-to place for indicators, metrics, etc., for anybody interested in holistically assessing the performance of landscapes and agri-food systems. We're doing that building up on an existing work through the Transitions Program funded by the EU, where we've already created a giant library of indicators and metrics. Now, with the Multifunctional Landscape Science Program, we can further enhance and enrich that, increase its sustainability, and above all, increase its user-friendliness. Now, with this set of indicators, we're then, based on what we have, ready to synthesize what is out there. For each of the landscapes, we're not engaging fresh, either the agroecology or the nature positive or the livestock and climate initiative have previously engaged in these landscapes. And of course, there's so much more going on outside of the CGIAR. So there's a lot of knowledge available that we don't need to assess again. So the first step per landscape is really synthesizing what we know and package that in a way that is really meaningful for the different stakeholders we're engaging in each of these landscapes. Then we're working together with the colleagues from Area of Work 2 to really think about, with these landscape actors, we've heard this morning, Sarah, maybe I have nudged you too much in this direction, but as human beings in a landscape, we need to have a common vision. We need to try to agree on where is it that we want to go. Of course, that is not easy. There is conflicts of interests. There is trade-offs in decisions in one direction or the other. But if we manage to find an inclusive process for really building that vision, I think that gives us, as communities living in a landscape, as stakeholders engaging with that landscape, a very good common umbrella under which to work. And then from Area of Work 6 on evidence-based decision-making, we're coming in and asking, okay, now that you know what it is that you want to achieve and what each of the actors' role is in that, what data gaps do you have? What information do you need? And how do you want to track and assess whether you're moving in the right direction with that? So, Timothy? Wow, I'm stunned. Amazing. Super. What we're then doing when we know, okay, this is what these colleagues would like to measure, we then go back to the database of indicators and metrics and develop landscape-specific assessment framework that is at nested scales. It includes assessments on the household level and data on the household level, but also many others on a higher level, including global and interconnected flows, including geospatial data, including gender data, everything that we can get to really make the information most meaningful for the actors that we engage with. And then we're turning all of that into information, because data is not the most helpful thing in the world if we don't know how to read it. So we need to find a way to really package all of this information in a coherent manner across landscapes and specifically for landscapes, and inform people in the way to really enable more evidence-based land use planning and decision making. Now, finally, information is one thing. Able to predict the future is the most powerful thing we can do. So we'd like to engage a lot more in modeling, both ex post, to find out, based on the existing data, what can we say, and then try to engage in foresight modeling with the vision to create digital twins of the landscapes we engage in, so we can really model and play with different scenarios. That if there's a new policy coming in, a new subsidy being designed, a new investment plan being set up, a new big business coming in, or it's farmers making decisions what kind of crops to plant, or it's a community deciding whether or not to cut down that forest, we can engage with them and say, look, these are the implications your decision will have. So think about these 2, 3, 4 different scenarios and think about how you get the best outcome given the vision that you have and the multiple functions your landscape has. Good. Thank you. Now, I was going to hand it over to Simone to facilitate a bit of a discussion, but Simone says she's tired, and that's very understandable. Thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing, Simone. So I'll just facilitate my own discussion, I guess. Okay, so there's a couple of questions up there, but we don't have a whole lot of time for this. So I would rather like to see if you have some questions to Christine and me, who just presented you very quick snapshot on what we've been doing and what we aim to be doing. So if anybody would like to respond to these questions or give us some insights, super welcome. But if you have any questions, that is equally welcome.
I think.
Oh, yes, super, you've got a mic.
Yeah, hello. I think you can hear me. Yeah. First of all, a lot of intensive work you have presented, so I appreciate. One point I was wondering, Christine started presentation. So with somebody's adopting one practice or two practice and three practice, it sometimes become really very difficult to understand what is going on there. So I think if we can have the outcome-based indicators, which will, because sometimes one practice somewhere at what level of that practice is, sometimes it's really very difficult to identify which normal practices which farmers are following. Halfway they are agroecology, halfway they are not. So sometimes difficult to classify them. So if you don't tell them anything, they are still doing agroecology actually every day. So, but when you say one practice, any farmer in the global south is doing agroecology actually in some sense. So I think if we identify outcome-based indicators, it will be a bit tough with more effort. I think it can guide us much better. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for those comments. So what I did was put on one slide for quantitative studies. We also have 4 qualitative studies. So you're really getting a very thin layer of our findings, and there's much deeper reasonings and qualitative backed up data that you can find in our reports. But certainly, yes, I agree. As a farmer myself, we're doing a lot of different practices, but it was based on what we were doing in the Nature Positive Solutions Initiative, and we also targeted communities that we were working with, as well as control communities. So there's a lot more details in, if you can move to the next slide, Timothy, we can maybe scan the reports. Colombia, then India, then Vietnam, then Kenya, then the true cost studies are up there. I don't know if your cameras will be able to capture them, but thanks. Matthias, back to you.
Just go ahead.
I have one general comment, though I have been part of this whole team, because now it's a time to start implementing the whole thing in the next 4 or 5 years. So because today I do not know how many people are here from sustainable farming or livestock. So many of those 13 principles are also applicable to sustainable farming and also sustainable livestock production. And maybe fish partly, because fish is sometimes even they have other ecosystem as well. But they are also in some way they are present. So I was wondering, it may be difficult this year, but can we really think that these 4 programs have joint activities at least some places, not necessarily a really physical place, but wherever it is possible. Otherwise, I think we will not be converging and separately going. Thanks.
I hope I speak for all of us that I very much hope we can do so, yes. And on your other question, I think that question of when is something nature positive, when is something agroecological is always difficult. And I agree it's not probably the best approach to just look at the number of practices, but we need to find simple solutions for things as well. I think you were next, gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Matthias. You made mention that in your study, some agroecological practices were not yielding positive results. May I know the threshold? Because it is observed that some practices may be agroecological, but when not applied as a system approach, you may not find a positive result. And a typical example is soil carbon buildup and pest and disease management. We have observed that depending on the diversity of the above ground cropping system and the management of the below ground soil health, achieving positive impact is not possible. So there will be the need, if we should go forward, to look at a threshold of what form of practices and at what combination in system approach can make a positive impact, and not making a general statement. 1 or 2 practice agroecological, it will not.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that comment. If you would turn off your mic, otherwise it could create an echo. Just to clarify, we did not, that was nature positive. In agroecology, we did not define agroecology exclusively based on practices, but upon integration of the 13 principles, which is that systems approach. And then if we calculate an overall score for that and we correlate it to performance dimensions, we see negative correlations, which isn't to say a negative cause and effect relationship, right? So we're still looking into the details of which agroecological principles specifically correlate positively with certain outcomes and vice versa, because it's a big group of things, right? And I fully agree with done a lot of other studies on the performance of agroecology, not just with this tool. And there's always these kind of things. And then it's about the qualitative explanation. It's not to say agroecology doesn't work per se, but I think for those, particularly in the room, who like to engage in advocacy, it's good to base these arguments on evidence and not just say, I believe in it. That's my main point about it. I think next was the gentleman here and then the lady over there. Yeah, you were 6th in line, Amel.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a questions on the adoption of agroecology in different contexts. One of your slides shows a large adoptions in Colombia and Vietnam, and low adoptions in, I think, in India and Kenya.
India and Kenya, yeah.
And then Kenya. So I just wonder if in different contexts, we can learn some things that may explain that difference.
Do you want to come in, Kristen?
Sure, and I think Carlo also wants to make a comment on the nature positive solution definition of practices, and then I'll come back to your question.
Yeah, no, just quickly also to mention that we didn't define nature positive based on the practice. We defined the nature positive based on the outcomes. And the practice was just one tool to see how it was a baseline survey. It's not, so we wanted to understand where the communities were in terms of implementing practices that would lead to nature positive outcomes, but we didn't define nature positive on the practice. We defined nature positive on the outcomes.
Thanks. Yes, and then as I said in the reports, there's a lot of details about the different types of communities. For instance, in Colombia, we had an indigenous community in the highlands and a different community in the lowlands. We were working in a very forested area in India, Kenya, we're in Lake Victoria, Vihiga, and Kisumu counties, as well as Kajiado counties. So there's a lot of variation of livelihoods and types of farmers and what they did to explain why the difference.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And I think it's very important to bear in mind when we now project countries that actually refers to sites, right? So results from nature positive or agroecology on Kenya do not reflect the entire diversity of agroecosystems in Kenya. Please, I think you were next there. Yes.
Thanks to the presenters. My question is about whether you've conducted any studies to assess policy support for agroecology. I know that it's these are all very good practices, but we need to ensure that they are supported. There's policy support for them, and they will be adopted. So has there been any such studies? Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Amel, please go ahead.
Thank you. A question to Christine. Those adoption intensity studies across 4 countries, and I see a lot of variation, in terms of the adoption intensity. Is that an adoption intensity at the pilot sites, or it's adopted by someone else outside the pilot? And if it is a pilot site, is that because of the community or because of the people who are implementing?
Thanks. It actually was not an adoption intensity study. We just presented a graph about adoption intensity. I don't know if Sadie Bukaka is here, but she can also explain more about the communities that were selected. I believe these results are from the Nature Positive Initiative sites. But yeah, this was a baseline study that we did. So we just presented one graph of about 15 to 20 graphs that we have in the reports. And now we need to close.
Super. Thank you all very, very much. I hope you can give yourself a big round of applause for your wonderful questions. And thanks a lot, Christine. With that, I'm handing it over to the next theme, basically. And that's Chris Kettle. And let's go.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for your patience, endurance, stamina, and probably dealing with your thirst, having been in here for so long. I'm Chris Kettle. I'm a principal scientist at the Alliance of Bioversity. At the Alliance of Biodiversity in SEAT. I'm a tropical ecologist and conservation geneticist, and I lead our work on biodiversity and resilient landscapes within the Alliance. I'm also the co-area of work lead on planning and governance and restoration within the Multifunctional Alliance Science Program.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tosin Shumarin. I'm a researcher at the International Water Management Institute. I support some of our work here. I'm probably not going to go into that, but I look into circular economy solutions and have a background from biological sciences up to engineering. Okay.
Thank you. And we promise we're not going to show you any data, any graphs, any statistics. What we want to do is actually start to think about really what resilience means and why biodiversity is at the foundation of resilience. So I'm going to ask you all to be patient. We're going to try together to guide you on a journey over the next 10 minutes, and we will try to keep it to 10 minutes, starting with a very big picture and starting with how you feel about resilient multifunctional landscapes. I want you to all close your eyes so you can really get in touch with how you feel. And I want you to open your other senses. Your hearing, your smell. And start thinking about what a multifunctional landscape looks like to you. Okay. So now you can open your eyes and you can have a look at this slide, because this is what artificial intelligence thinks a multifunctional landscape looks like. And this is what artificial intelligence thinks a non-multifunctional landscape looks like. And I wonder if that has any relationship with what happened in your head. It's important to think about how that relates to resilience. You can cut the audio now, thank you. When we have low biodiversity, we have low crop diversity, we have low natural vegetation diversity, we have low soil microbial diversity, we have over-extractive water consumption, we have low resilience. We have a low capacity to deal with pressures and stresses in our environment. And when we are faced with shocks, we have a limited ability to deal with them. When we start to integrate more biodiversity, we switch that. We increase the resilience. We have more resilient diets. We have more resilient livelihoods. We have more resilient systems. I taught resilient ecological systems for 10 years at the ETH Zurich before I joined the CGIAR. And I think what I want you to really take away is not the processes, but actually the interactions. It's the interactions between the organisms that gives the resilience to ecological and agroecological systems and people. It's affecting our diet, our health. We reduce our diet diversity, we reduce our health. Next slide. So the World Bank actually asked us to think about this problem in terms of their investment in how agriculture drives nature loss. And we've been thinking about this as a CGIAR, as a whole team over the last year and a half, and Tosin will go into some depth about the drivers in critical situations. But we've been thinking about those critical drivers in the context of use of water, excessive water withdrawal, how monocultures influence different ecosystem services, and the use of crop inputs all together and how they influence biodiversity, but more importantly, how they influence ecosystem services that we depend on as society, how they influence the regulation of our water, our air, our quality of the things we consume, how they affect the provision of our habitats, options for genetic resources, how they undermine the resources we need for a resilient future, and how they regulate other things like disease and control and pollination. If we start pumping more chemicals, more antibiotics into the system, that has a consequence. It has a consequence for biodiversity, has a consequence for society. Whereas if we shift that and we start to adapt nature positive or practices in agriculture that actually benefit biodiversity, enhancing the way we achieve biodiversity with our landscapes, that directly has a consequence for that ecosystem service provision, which leads to how we can use science to understand those drivers to manage landscapes to deliver those ecosystem services. So next slide. So we actually developed a typology of some of the critical landscape systems that are can be mitigated to reduce nature loss. There are some key ones like forest frontiers, agrochemical intensive industry, livestock intensive agriculture, and highly water extractive agriculture. And then we look at the drivers of those around water management, soil and land management, diversification, and how we manage the pollution and waste. Next slide. And then what are the innovations in agriculture that can really address those? Innovations that can address water conservation, improve soil health, and conservation of that diversity we so critically depend on. And then waste and pollution reduction. All the things we've been hearing about in the bioeconomy work that we've been doing across the CGIAR and Salome already talked about. Next slide. So really we're going to dig a little bit deeper now into how, in a specific case, those drivers influence biodiversity. So I'm going to hand over to Tosin.
Thank you very much, Chris. We go to the next slide. So what we did with the World Bank project was to look at how agricultural practices, and sustainable ones, impacts biodiversity and ecosystem services. And like Chris mentioned, we looked at this from 4 domains. There were actually 5, but we looked at 4 domains. One on soil and land management, looking at how water resources are used in agriculture, but also looking at how pollutants are managed in agriculture. And then we looked at climate change as a driver of biodiversity loss, but also as an impact of agricultural practices. But in doing this sort of work, what we needed to do first was to look at what is the main criteria for doing all of this work across these 4 domains. So we developed a criteria for selecting the drivers. Obviously, in agriculture, there are quite a lot of them. There are socioeconomic drivers, there are direct, land, the direct practices. And so we mapped this to the 3, one looking at the widespread use of those practices across globally, looking at evidence for the severity and the scale of impact of these practices, but also looking at how they are connected to each other. For example, how you manage water affects how your soil condition is. And then we developed this framework, and it's using the DPSRI framework, like the drivers, the pressures, the states, and the impacts. And our colleagues went further to look at the responses, which is sustainable practices. But just to backtrack a little bit, so Chris has mentioned that there were 4 farming typologies, but then we look at these typologies across scale. So there are things that are done at farm level, and there are things that are done at landscape. We also looked at biodiversity from different perspectives. So there's genetics, there is the aspects of species diversity and ecosystem diversity as a whole. We looked at different ecosystem services, but we prioritized the ones that are affecting things that are regulatory, that are biophysical. And our work was meant to look at how does these all sustainable practices lead to those impacts. And that is understanding the science, the pathways to which this is happening, to look at are there any feedbacks and loops in all of that system, and also defining what are primary, secondary, or tertiary impacts. Next slide, please. So I'll give you an example. We have 4 domains, and I've just given an example of the agricultural water management drivers. I'm not going to go into all of that, but I would just say that what we identified were 3 main water management drivers in agriculture. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes, all right. So one of the things we identified was that the way water is managed in irrigation, and irrigation water is managed in agriculture, was one major driver, but also the aspect of excessive abstraction of water from the aquifer, but also looking at it from a landscape level, how water is managed from the upstream to downstream, how water is managed. And I think that those were the 3 main drivers in agricultural water management. And then we divided that into sub-drivers. There were individual sub-drivers. For example, one of these would be large establishment of large irrigation schemes, which is quite prominent in Asia. And then we looked at what are the pressures, what are these biophysical changes you see in the environment, and some of this will be waterlogging of soils, almost to the climate stressors around warming of the planet. And then we link that to impact on biodiversity and ecosystem services. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to give an example. So this is an example of the waterlogging impact on biodiversity and ecosystem service. This is more a detailed diagram. I don't want to go into that, but if you go to click the next. So this is a simplified illustration of that. So if you look at waterlogging, for example, in rice fields, one of the things we see that there is an impact on soil aeration. There is accumulation of toxic compounds in plants, but also in soil environments, and that changes soil biodiversity, also changes the plant morphology over time. And how does that impact on biodiversity? You see an ecosystem services as a whole. You look at increased greenhouse gas emissions from those anaerobic conditions that are created. We have a decline in beneficial soil microorganisms, but this could present itself as a shift in, from aerobic to anaerobic organisms and all the microbial structure around that, but also could lead to nutrient deficiency in plants, for example, in the nutrient uptake in plants. And then we related that into the ecosystem services. There were about 9 of them. But for example, just looking at how this exactly relates, look at how this affects climate, local climate regulation, but also the soil fertility and maintenance of that environment. And then relating that to when you have a lot of plants, loss of plant biodiversity, for example, that affects habitat provisioning in that environment. So we developed about 16 of this sort of frameworks with notes, and that was what informed the sustainable practices that Chris will talk more about.
Thanks, Tosin. Yeah, I'm going to be quick now because I know we're already running out of time. This is the last major slide. But what we're trying to do now is to integrate those kind of understandings into how we can develop informed tools to help make decisions on the ground. And so we're really looking at things being spatially explicit, and these will form some of the foundations of how we influence the planning and governance, and how we work together to manage and design multifunctional landscapes that deliver all of the needs that we need to deliver. And for example, and the most important is combining that with climate data, understanding the interactions between how we're changing the landscape and how climate change is influenced, because these things are very synergistic. And so how, for example, we can develop spatially explicit threat analysis for biodiversity. This is an example of tree diversity from the whole of Southeast Asia, where we looked at economically important tree species, but this equally applies to crop wild relatives, to fish diversity, and we have the capacity to do this at spatially explicit levels. And then to combine that with other approaches like agrobiodiversity index that looks at diet diversity, and then combined with bioacoustic monitoring, which is what you heard at the beginning from our living lab in Makweni, where you heard the recordings that can be analyzed with AI to be able to monitor that diversity as we move through the process of decisioning how we change landscape. Next slide. So then combining that with actually supporting decision-making on how biodiversity is actually going to benefit on the ground, delivering livelihood improvement, improved carbon sequestration, and ecosystem service delivery. And we have a tools developed for that diversity for restoration. Next slide. And then actually how we implement all that on the ground. So we developed tools like My Farm Trees, you may have heard of, where we actually use that data to actually support the building of capacity of farmers to integrate that biodiversity on the ground and receive direct benefits for the integration of that diversity. And then coupling with all that, actually the economic analysis that our colleagues at IMI have been really championing about, understanding the cost of these ecosystem services and their value, so we can put this all together and understand really the true costs of how we manage resilient landscapes. Now that's a hell of a lot, and I know you're thinking, wow, this is just too much for me. So I thought, why not ground this right down to reality again? And so I'm really delighted to have here Gabriel Odon, who's a farmer from CGIAR County, but also he's the director of natural resource management, hydrology and climate change from the CGIAR County, where we've been deploying some of these tools, and particularly My Farm Trees, to give a bit of a real world context of how these things are relevant. Over to you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Chris, and all of us who are here. As you said, my name is Gabriel Odon. I work for the county government of CGIAR as a director for environment, climate change, and natural resources. Chris didn't tell you, but is the global lead for My Farm project. There's a national lead, Francis Odon, somewhere here, and I've taken up the role of being the local champion, the local lead for the My Farm Tree project in CGIAR County. It's true, My Farm Tree is actually working. I can give evidence, even in court, that this is something that we really need to adopt as a government. I come from a government that historically, when you research, it's one of those that have been characterized with the lowest tree cover. It's one of those that, of course, we know in Kenya, our president has running the mandate of 15 billion trees in the next 15 years. We've been given a target as a county of 14 million trees to be planted every year. My Farm Tree is actually one of our driving agents for that cause. And it's not just for the sake of climate action or achieving the climate commitments of the Kenya government to the community, but it's also addressing the community felt needs. I come from that area that even before the My Farm Tree project started, under different program, we were running what we call participatory climate risk assessments in every ward. And in the ward of West Ugenya, where this project is, actually one old man told me there's been loss of biodiversity. He used to see butterflies during planting seasons or crop weeding seasons. He no longer sees them in his 65 years of age. What has happened? Loss of biodiversity. Climate risk are associated with it. Water quality, like where the project is being implemented, when we were doing ground truthing, led by Chris and the national lead Francis, and of course their Cameroonian colleague, we realized actually the source of water is a water pan called Mauna. It's actually a public water supply system that supplies to Kuala Town, but the sedimentation, the level of sediment loads in that water and the quality, actually over the rainy seasons cost us as a county government enormous amounts of money to treat the water, right? And so tree planting comes in as a natural way of addressing by stabilizing soil. It actually controls erosion and land degradation, and definitely would improve our water quality in time. I know we are pressed by time, but summarily, I would just like to say this is one program that we are seeing working. And what makes it work, what makes it stand out, the uniqueness it comes with, it's that it addresses the issue of low silvicultural practices in CGIAR County. But with this, we are seeing farmers actually saying, yes, I'll plant maize and beans on my farms. But because of the payment for ecosystem services model that the My Farm Tree project adopts, I see farmers actually craving to even do boundary tree planting. And of course, with the given species that would add additionality to the soil fertility, like Gliricidia is being promoted there. We are seeing some of the tree species being promoted that address the local challenges that even us as government have been facing in promoting tree planting in CGIAR County. And that's the issues to do with the species that are adaptable, that are anti-browsing. I mean, for public institutions where cattle grazing actually destroys the tree planting, that are pest tolerant to the termites that are there. And we are seeing farmers, because they're getting paid for these ecosystem services, they are actually spurred and encouraged to actually keep this tree surviving, because they know at the end of every year, there'll be disbursement on the amount of trees that have survived, and that means they have to take care of them. So that is one of the beautiful things that is happening courtesy of this project. And because of that, leveraging on this and learning from best practices, for all of you here and the organizers, the county government of CGIAR, during this World Environment Day of 5th June 2025, will be hosting the World Environment Day Convention or exhibition in North Ugenya Ward. We've been talking with Alliance Biodiversity, and they agree they'll be assisting us to host it. They'll be displaying, and we would like to extend the invitation to all of you who can make it to CGIAR County and see real life where now research issues are actually being executed at the ground and the grassroots, and you will meet the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. And the purpose was not to get a promo for My Farm Trees. It really wasn't. It was to actually illustrate that biodiversity. When I was interviewed for the job at Biodiversity, I always said biodiversity. Now I've been there so long, I always say biodiversity when I mean biodiversity. So the importance of biodiversity being integrated into our landscapes for resilience, and Gabriele summarized that really well. So I think I just want to thank the whole team for the contributions to this, and to open the question to you very simply, what does a resilient multifunctional landscape look like to you?
Thank you so much. It's really super interesting presentations and discussion. I think actually, to me, a really resilient landscape looks a little bit messier than those AI pictures. You know, straight lines don't really exist in nature. So I think often when you really have resilience, everything is much more integrated, is much more mixed, and it is that kind of edge between different components where you get the really interesting interactions. So I think that's just kind of my main thing. And also it includes wildlife, which isn't being mentioned much. Thanks.
Biodiversity.
I know, but
Is that what you do? Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, my question is also based on the first slide done by artificial intelligence. Can you project that? Because for me, it's mind blowing. And yeah. So exactly. So in the right part, there is something which is missing, and it's power. There is no power. There is no center of power. In the left part, you can guess the president or the king or whomever or the queen is staying in one of these high building. Okay, and in the right part, there is no center of power. I don't see not even a temple, not.
The new version.
So this has been done by artificial intelligence. You confirm that it's not you. It's okay. That's very interesting. So my question to you is, can we do that without engaging power?
Yeah.
And I had this question since this morning, which hovered in my head, which was, can an approach like agroecology based on human dignity and participation work in a world where people are not considered equal in dignity and participation is generally discouraged, be it economic, social, political? So this is the question which has been going to my head since this morning. Then I saw that, and that's mind-blowing for me. And also our colleague asked, in evaluating the adoption of a different nature positive solution, do we have evidence about the impact of policy support?
So the question is power in a multifunctional landscape? Yeah, of course. And I mean, I wouldn't say I'm pretend to be qualified to answer that question. In a grand scheme of things, I have my opinions, and of course we need to. And in fact, one of the reasons why we developed the platform of My Farm Trees was to decentralize that power away, so farmers receive direct incentives for what they're doing and are empowered to act within themselves on that. And of course, you know, these landscapes are going to be much more complex. But I'm much more interested in what your thoughts are. Yeah, Nancy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what a resilient multifunctional landscape.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Nancy from WWF, and I think you want us to talk about what a resilient landscape is, but I really believe that it's one that should allow positive interactions between people and nature. But also I have a question about the program on multifunctional landscapes, because I'm hearing you talking about boundaries, like using administrative words. And I would be expecting you to use a different level of boundaries using a biome system. Like if you're talking about Kisumu, Siaya, I want you to be talking about that water basin becoming your focus rather than using an administrative system. And this is what I would request, that this program actually looks at the critical biomes. Like if we are in a country, which biomes do we really want to save that are highly threatened by agriculture, so that we are going there to do this. And I think that is where the work on landscapes by the CG would be would be much required. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, these need to be at hydrological, landscape, and biophysical and ecosystem levels. Yeah. So
I've got a microphone.
Yeah.
Phil Stevenson again. Can you tell me a little bit about how you disaggregate wild biodiversity, which in my interpretation includes pollinators, natural pest regulating animals, from agrobiodiversity, which I consider to be the diversity of plants and animals that we use to make our food. Yeah. Infraspecies as well, biodiversity, because if farmers are asked to be involved in that, then they're going to be less productive farmers. Yep. And there's going to be additional compensation. Absolutely. One suggestion is that we consider that to be part of OECMs, which could contribute to GBF 30 by 30 targets. Yep. But are there any other sort of incentives that you think would be useful to engage farmers in that?
No, absolutely. And we haven't even got into the debate about land sparing, land sharing, land maxing, and any of those things, which are going to be absolutely fundamental to the multifunctional landscapes approaches. But I think your point really valid is another really interesting one, is that blurred boundary between agrobiodiversity and biodiversity and wild biodiversity, when much agrobiodiversity is wild biodiversity. So these terminologies are not always useful in the context of these planning exercises. So I think I'm going to run out of time. I think I'm out of time. Is that right? We're out of time. I would open the discussion to during lunch so that we move on. Thank everyone for keeping the energy, and we're very much looking forward to interacting with you further. And I'll pass over to Stefan and Carlo. Carlo?
Yes, and while they're coming up, please come up. Thank you so much for joining this session. We're going to reward you with lunch. So hang in there. This is the last of the thematic sessions, and then as you like, we can answer a lot of questions afterwards, and then have lunch. But let's continue with theme 4.
Okay, we just pass it. Yeah, thank you very much. So this session is going to be more on genetic diversity, agrobiodiversity, and how important they are within the context of multifunctional landscape. So it's a little bit a deep dive into this additional component. But we had a little bit of, and my name is Carlo Fadda. I work for the Alliance of Biodiversity International in CGIAR, where I lead the research area on biodiversity for food and agriculture, and I also was the Nature Positive lead, global lead, and I'm leading area of work 1 in the multifunctional landscape. And we heard a lot of this agrobiodiversity. To me, it remains quite a complex issue in a world that tend to provide premium to homogeneity, standard products, etc. How do we give this agrobiodiversity to the farmers, although we know they can improve nutrition, resilience, etc.? And so I would like to ask Steph, and we heard a lot over also in the past years about there was the VAX movement, opportunity crops. There is actually momentum in the talk around agrobiodiversity. So from our perspective, Steph, what are the innovations that we bring in this sphere?
Yeah, thank you, Carlo. It's nice to do this interview. We both have the same passion, and we kind of, this is a kind of agrobiodiversity speed dating that we're gonna do. So we're gonna challenge each other, hopefully a little bit. My name is Stef de Haan. I work for the International Potato Center, and I'm also a researcher and affiliated with Wageningen University. So indeed, also in the morning, we saw in the graph the links between the gene banks and the biodiversity. And so many of the landscapes where we work and will continue to work, they are in these Vavilov centers or centers of origin where crops were domesticated. And every time when we go to the field, we encounter farmers with very high levels of diversity that are still maintained. And so also with the gene bank, and with the farmers, how do we actually collaborate and make use of this diversity? Of course, it has part of the resilience, it is part of the functions that it provides to the farmers, but there is also the science element of actually keeping track and monitoring of this diversity. So 50 years ago, when the CGIAR was very much involved in the Green Revolution, we all just assumed that this would disappear. No, but we know that in many of the agrobiodiversity hotspots and with the agroecology movement, a lot of this varietal diversity and neglected and underutilized species is still there, and it will probably remain, and is part of the adaptation and evolution. So we can measure that all the way from genes and the microbiome, all the way to the hotspot level, the landscape level, and we kind of have to bridge those different levels. And also we have to think about how there are several elements, the reciprocity, the complementary knowledge between the indigenous knowledge, the formal knowledge, how we monitor the diversity in the field so we know that genetic erosion exists or not exists, or the backup. Yeah. Carlo, let me pass to you again.
Yeah, no, thank you. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think that brought a lot of clarity. Where is the genetic diversity? Is in situ, is in the gene bank. We have methods and tools for understanding it better. And also we have done a lot of work, and we will continue doing a lot of work under the multifunctional landscape on promoting agrobiodiversity. But once we know that this is there, and we have papers showing that there is genetic erosion, how do we actually monitor the agrobiodiversity if we are successful in actually increasing agrobiodiversity?
Yeah, so this is exactly what is lacking for agrobiodiversity. We are kind of blind. No, when we talk about potatoes in Bolivia, where you are from, or we talk about teff in Ethiopia, who can answer really how many land races there are and what is their conservation status? No, we can do it for the wild diversity. We have we have eBirds for the birds. We have citizen science, but we don't really know for the cultivated diversity. So one of the things that Nature Positive and Agroecology worked on is to develop an app which is called VAR Scout, which is kind of like an e-naturalist tool to monitor land races, and to do that together with schools and with teachers as part of the curriculum. So one example is Peru and Colombia last year, when there was the International Year of Potato on May 30th. There was the Ministry of Education launched a national citizen science contest. No, so involving custodian farmers and youth and in this documentation is one option. The other option is land race catalogs, also genetic measurement, plant photography, and there is a toolbox that has about 10 different tools that was developed on the Nature Plus that is available to monitor this diversity at multiple levels. But now let's go to the next slide and pass to you, Carlo, because I think also one of the questions is, like, are these in situ and ex situ really mirrors of each other? How can we back up each other? No, and how can we make it available for the future generation?
Yeah, thank you. Really important question. We know during the 50, you mentioned 50 years ago when the CGIAR was supporting the Green Revolution on the assumption that all this genetic diversity would disappear, a lot of material has been collected and put in gene banks, being them international or national. And the structure, the way those gene banks have been designed was one way. We take material from the field and from the farmers and from the communities, we store them for the breeders, for future generation, but there was no mechanism perceived to return this material because there would have been no need. All of this diversity would have been replaced by high productive varieties, so there was not even a need to conceptualize how this material would go back. And as Steph was saying, this didn't happen. There is still a lot of material, even when farmers have access to improved seeds, they still prefer their own varieties and they still prefer to use them. So it's not necessarily access to technology, but it's an explicit choice because these land races are better for the farmers that are using them. And so that will create a movement around how do we integrate better in situ and ex situ conservation. And for example, understanding whether the ex situ is conserving in national gene bank or in international gene bank the genetic diversity that is in the farmer fields. Because things can happen. We have climate change. We have floods, drought, and so seeds could be lost. So it's important that there is this integration between ex situ and in situ. It is important that the gene bank material, which is well adapted to prevailing climatic conditions, which are not the same 20, 30 years ago, can be repatriated to the farmer fields. It is important that this diversity is incorporated into the production system of the farmers. And there are many ways through which this diversity can be exchanged and can become relevant in terms of the seed security. Farmers very much participate when there are fairs organized, or vouchers or insurance mechanism that can allow the farmers to have access to this planting material. And that is another critical aspect, that many times all of this is in the informal domain, and at times it's too informal. So you don't have clarity about the quality of the seeds, you don't have clarity about whether the seed has the characteristics that the farmers work. So one important part of the work is really to make sure that we deliver the material to the farmers in the way they want, and this is this part. Obviously, not all the genetic diversity is important to the farmers, so it's also important that the connection between the field and the ex situ facility is maintained, because maybe this will be useful 20 years from now, and they need to remain conserved in ex situ because at the moment they're not preferred by the farmers. And if you can go to the next slide. So farmers, we push and we want the farmers to actually use this genetic diversity. How can they benefit from it, actually? I mean, we talk nutrition, climate change, resilience, but even in monetary terms.
Yeah, so One level is the intrinsic benefits, no, and those relate to resilience, food security. But as you all may have heard during the sessions from the Gene Bank, there was a lot of discussion about the 11th governing body meeting in Peru, and what is the demand from civil society organizations and indigenous farmers, no, to really put benefit sharing into practice. There's a huge gap between the policy and the good intentions and the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that indigenous communities that are often in remote locations can actually not access those benefit sharing schemes. No? So the big question is, how can we put benefit sharing and farmers' rights really into practice? How can we work with indigenous groups and federations? How can we strengthen them? So one of the experiences that we try to expand with Nature Positive is to have different methods, think out of the box. So one of these schemes is called RESCA. RESCA is kind of an auction that is promoted through the Ministries of Environment for those groups of farmers that want to maintain threatened varieties. Another element is linking private sector and indigenous organizations directly. This is the case of AguaPan, which now exists for 10 years and receives from multiple companies every year direct monetary payment that they invest in education, in health, or in agricultural labor. And I just got news yesterday from one additional company in Germany. They're called Europlant. This year they have their anniversary, and they will contribute to this fund directly for benefit sharing. So to think about ways of out of the box, where everything has to go through one mechanism, so we can have a basket of options to provide farmer rights and to provide monetary payments or non-monetary payments, I think is an important element. The other element is, of course, high-value markets. High-value markets and markets that are differentiated, and how can we bring, for example, varietal mixtures to the table of consumers, no? And so that's another option that is maybe more direct. So, Carlo, maybe continuing with the speedboat about scientists and farmers. In my experience, farmers are sometimes better scientists than scientists, or there needs to be a dialogue, no? And so between this, what we call indigenous localized knowledge, or the formal knowledge, and kind of bridging those two, what options do you think are there for complementary mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you. In some spaces, a lot of these traditional crops and varieties are called neglected and underutilized. They're not neglected and underutilized by the farmers, but they are neglected and underutilized by the research. So indeed, the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, the knowledge that farmers have around these crops is probably much greater than the formal knowledge that could be there. And the farmers are also great scientists in many different aspects. First of all, we think farmers are conservative. They don't like innovation. That's because they don't adopt our innovation, and then we think, oh, these farmers are backward. They don't like what we do. But maybe they have reasons for that. In fact, farmers, when you do participatory research, the farmers are very keen to test everything that you promote with them and to retain everything that works with them. So they are very innovative and very eager to do what they do. They have, of course, a lot of knowledge also about the more formal side of agriculture. We published a paper on PNAS, where farmers' evaluation for predicting yield was higher than the model that we designed specifically for the set of diversity that we had there, measured with quantitative data. So we used the advanced crop model. We input the data from the breeders. We try to predict which varieties would give greater yield. We asked farmers to come and evaluate. They gave their evaluation. We analyzed the evaluation data, and the farmers' prediction was higher than the model. So still people can beat artificial intelligence, and still farmers can do that as well. So, and then the nutrition. The farmers know very well the nutrition of these crops. They know what they're good for. They have hundreds of years of experience around that. And also maybe instead of starting from scratch to just analyzing and do nutritional characteristic, maybe we can start by listening to them. And that will accelerate a lot the adoption and the promotion and the availability of these crops, because science takes time. But if we listen to farmers, we can speed up and go much faster into this. They know the use and the taxonomy. They know when they are useful, which kind of soil, under which condition, under which climatic condition. They know the traits that are more important for them. And so they can really help us out in terms of understanding what is behind this traditional knowledge. So I think that the complementary knowledge around agrobiodiversity, genetic diversity, if we really want to have quick solutions to really difficult problems, we can do that if we just accept that we need to work together with the farmers, and also accept a little bit their cosmovision that sometimes is much more complex than ours. No? Some seeds are used in cultural exchange, during religious ceremony, etc. So they are really integrated more deeply into, if you want, the soul of the farming communities than we even can imagine.
Yeah, so my last question to you, and then we open up for discussion with the audience, is seed systems. No? And seed systems are really kind of a window into time. Every seed that we hold in our hands, we can trace it back to hundreds of years or thousands of years ago, whether it's an innovation from breeding or whether it's a land race that has been passed on from different families till date. So between kind of the farmer seed systems and what we call the formal seed system, what are the options for innovation there to really integrate agrobiodiversity at the landscape level?
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me tell you that I really don't like, again, this discrimination. There was a question before if farmers prefer agroecology or nature positive or regenerative. My perspective, having talked probably to thousands of farmers by now, is that they don't really care and about our terminology and our way of doing. If a farmer wants to produce commercial maize and he wants to have a hybrid, he knows where to go and he gets the hybrid from there. And then if he wants to complement this in his farming with traditional beans, because that's also important for him, he knows where to get and where to go. So the farmer doesn't care whether it's formal and informal as much as they can get what they want and what they need. Now, the problem is that it's very easy for the farmers to know what to get and where to get the improved varieties and the breeder varieties, but at times it's much less complicated to do so in the informal system. So sometimes they don't know where they can get the good variety of a neglected species. They don't know if that variety is actually viable and of good quality. They don't know. So once and I hope we are convinced in this room that it's important that we use and deploy this agrobiodiversity within production system, I think we need to put in play mechanism for this to be efficient and effective. And community seed bank is one of them. Community seed bank builds, again, in the traditional way the farmers keep their seeds. It brings probably, because also we should not think that all we do in research is useless. So it also provide training and capacity to improve the quality of seeds. That it's something that we, the CGIAR, but the National Research System and other actors are very good at doing. And then we need to make sure that they manage this farmer-led seed system in a way that combine those experiences. Because at the end of the day, the formal system delivers high quality, high germinability, high characteristics of the traits that the farmers want. And these are good features, and we need to make sure that they're also available in the formal seed system. So we need to strengthen them. We need to make sure that if the farmers really want to bring those production at scale, that they have access to the planting material that they want, and we need to make sure that they make a profit out of it. Otherwise, the farmers will never go into this kind of business. So I think that, and so the governance part that becomes very important on how this can happen. Thank you. Here, well, again, maybe the same as for Matthias, we put these questions for, we have put these questions as a guidance, but again, if you have other questions based on other things that we mentioned, of course, we are open to answer those.
Yes, and these are just guiding questions. I think the overall question is about vitality, really the rural vitality in the landscape. So how can agrobiodiversity be used also to create well-being, nutritional income? How can youth be involved in the conservation, because a lot of the custodian farmers, whether it's of the traditional land races of rice in Laos or potatoes in Colombia, or the Amazonian fruits in Peru, a lot of them, the knowledge and the custodianship is with older farmers. So what relevance and vitality does this have for youth at the landscape level? Let's open up for questions or comments. Yes.
That was a good presentation. However, I have something I've picked during the presentations. I'm yet to hear, and I'm curious to know more about when you talk about small-scale farming, areas where, or issues like having farmers practice controlled types of farming, like greenhouse, and the effects. Another question would be on what motivated the study in Kenya in different parts of the country, as opposed to just where about bigger sections of Kenya, bearing in mind that we do have very erratic weather patterns that have influenced the kind of farming we see in the country. And also, I'd like to get to understand what are you doing in terms of working with farmers, especially with the third presentation, or the last one, where we have indigenous seeds that are already neglected or are not there, but are now being replaced by others that are already in developed in labs. And we're yet to see the kind of yield that was there as compared to the previous ones that we had based on farmer evidence.
Yes, maybe I can quickly get to the last question, and then I'll pass to Carlo, who knows the reality in Kenya much better than I do. But within agroecology and within Nature Plus, we've done several things with the native seeds. One of them is first the principle of making them visible and documenting how much there is. So there were multiple efforts to make catalogs and inventories of those local varieties, because you can only conserve what you know that exists. And another element was then to look for high value markets with chefs or with supply chains. Another element where there was demand for restoration, these activities around rematriation and community seed banks. Those are 3 examples. There were more, but I'll pass to Carlo.
Yeah, no, thank you. Maybe that also answer a little bit. So in terms of the space in Kenya, of course, I mean, first of all, limitation is resource capacity. We cannot be everywhere. Yet we think that particularly in Kenya, our investment goes, at least in this initiative, then our respective centers have projects in other parts of the country, but we go from Kiambu, Makueni, Vihiga, Kisumu, so it goes all the way from central Kenya to the lake Victoria. So I think we cover quite a spread geographic scope. And then in terms of the species, I think we are doing exactly so. Even the presentation that Chris gave before on the My Farm tree, these are not the commercial trees. These are the indigenous species. These are the traditional species. And the process has been talking to the farmer. Which trees do you want? Which are the trees that provide the greatest benefit to you? What kind of benefit? Is it the fruit trees, the nutrition? Is it non-timber products, the honey production? And the reason why the traditional knowledge is so important is because their community are the one who can answer the question, but we cannot. And once those process of working with the farmers in a participatory way to identify the beneficial species they want, this is when you start producing the 200,000 seedlings, if I heard it well, that were then planted actually in the field. But these are all traditional species. They are outside the commercial part. And the same goes with the crop. We work with the farmers, we sit with them, we ask them which are the major crops that are important for you. That can include also maize, of course, because maize is very important. But then we start working where we can do better our job, which is promoting and adding value to these more traditional crops. No? So, but this is the selection of the crops, the type of activities, the selection of varieties is done completely with the farmers, so they're not the commercial one, but it's actually revitalizing the traditional one based on farmers' needs. So if the farmers say, we don't want this anymore, we don't push for anything that farmers don't ask us to do. Any more? Yes.
Thank you. I want to make an attempt to answer those questions for the audience. And what I want to say is this, right? What we need to do now from the Science Week or from this meeting of minds of global experts, we also have practitioners here, borrowing from the presentation by Olivaros of science, movement, and now practice, right? So we have a critical mass of people who now enhance practice. And so what I wanted to suggest is probably one of the ways to do this is to enhance now dissemination of science and research material to what we think are now host research institutions, because I'm taking over mind, like from CGIAR, where I come from, there is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University, right at the CGIAR town, which also has outreach programs to communities. There are government officers like me now, I've gotten this knowledge, I can share with them, but now can influence the thinking of community members so that during what we call public participation, where communities are prioritizing their needs to be funded by the government or the government exchequer, then we say this is also another priority, or we need to build on what research work has been doing for My Farm Trees, and now the county can also start financing because it comes the need from public. Thank you.
No, I completely agree. And I think one of the strengths maybe of agroecology is the agroecology movement. No? And so last week I was able to spend 2 weeks with Asaf in Uganda, and impressive to see how 40,000 smallholder farmers are organized. That is like a basic platform to work together between different groups. The issue often for the farmers who maintain a lot of diversity of food groups that compared to those who could produce cacao or those who could produce coffee, they're often not organized or not organized in a cooperative. And then, of course, the question is like, how do you get the dialogue and the diffusion going? So investing in base organizations, cooperating with farmer federations and cooperatives is really, I think, a very essential way also for multifunctional landscapes to move forward.
Yeah, and if I can add, I think that is exactly another thing. The Kisumu County is asking us to provide technical backstopping because they want to establish 5 more community seed banks. So as the government coming, looking, talking, you are a voter. Those farmers are voters. So if they go there and there is a critical mass of voters telling, listen, this works for us. This is really improving our livelihood. And new government is here to improve our livelihood, no? So then the government will be much more keen to come to us and say, and it's much more powerful than us giving a presentation to them if they come to the field and they talk to the farmers. So I think this interaction between the government, but also give political agency to farmers, bring them together, give them a voice to speak, then we really have a very fruitful two-way conversation also with policymakers that can further stimulate investment towards agroecology. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to try and address your middle question. How can research unlock biodiscovery use? We've recently proposed adopting unified approaches to conserving wild biodiversity for agrobiodiversity. And there may be some value in thinking about those approaches as a way of addressing that. One issue is around payments for agrobiodiversity conservation schemes. That's obviously got lots of issues and challenges with it, not least of all having a sort of a consistent approach to individuals. But in terms of opportunity crops, if there was a way of adapting red listing as an approach that could make a much more uniform model that could be applied to compensating farmers for conserving opportunity crops, that would be a way forward, just as an example, just a way of kind of incorporating what are kind of fairly well-established approaches to wild biodiversity. One other thing I'd just like to say with respect to opportunity crops, I hadn't heard of opportunity crops before I came here. They used to be called orphan crops, and before that they were marginal crops, and someone else is calling them forgotten crops. Is there any way we can have some consistency in terminology that helps us make sure that we're all on the same page.
Well, I get someone woke up and said, oh, I had a brilliant ideas. We need to use these opportunity crops. And then they forgot that there was all this background 30, 40 years of working on forgotten crops, neglected species. Probably what I would encourage is to have something that is more positive, no? Because on the one hand, you have the improved varieties, you have the high yielding varieties. On the other, you have the forgotten and the neglected and underutilized and the land races. And obviously, from a linguistic point of view, there is no competition. The improved one, high yielding, will win. No? So probably we need to even think of a more positive spin. Just would like to comment on the red list one, because I think that we need to address, I like the idea, and I don't know if you know Stefano Padulosi, a retired colleague of us who was pushing for this red listing for a long time, even in conversation with IUCN. I think the risk is that it becomes a little bit too static. And one of the advantages of using these crops in production year after year with the farmers selecting the seeds for the next season is that you facilitate adaptation and you facilitate genetic changes. So it's basically the contrary about stability that is one of the pillars of the breeders. And so what I fear is that if you have the red listing and you have a very strict description of that, then you don't take into account the need for these varieties to change to remain adapted to the climate. But other than that, I think, yes, that's one of the things that could be very relevant. You want to comment?
No, yeah, just a brief comment on that. There is two protocols also in the toolbox. And last year, Nigel Maxted from the University of Birmingham, he also published a method for red listing. But the intra-year and between year variation often is difficult to capture. So the agility of the methods is also very important. But having standardized procedures is key, I think.
Yeah. My name is Sarah, and I'm from Uganda, from Narrow. I just wanted to try to answer the question number 3. In my country, we have 70% who are youth, the whole population. And I think to answer that question, I think we need to add value, because when we add value, you can easily attract the youth to the different, like the crops. I will give an example of the sector where I'm working. I work in the coffee sector. And we have come up with a number of products which the youth can take up. For example, we have creams, we have lotions, we have cakes from coffee, and the youth are willing to take up that. So that will ensure continuity in that even though they may not want to plant the coffee, but the end product of coffee can be used by the youth. And thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And just to complement, what is also happening is a lot of land fragmentation, no, in many African countries. So the youth, they find themselves without land because it has been so fragmented. And so I think engaging them in this more value addition, in these other other activities, I think it's a very valid one. And maybe the other is, though, again, the traditional knowledge. The farmers, the old farmers know about nutrition, how good these crops are for you. But many times there is a big gap and big difficulties in transmitting this knowledge to the next generation. So the youth are not aware of all these benefits.
I think we probably need to close it here. I think you're already all very resilient to stay on till now. I'll pass on to maybe one last question. Yes.
This is just about integrating science, especially on the research and development. What are we doing so far in terms of maybe creating weather pattern systems or warning signs that can advise farmers on how they can be elevating issues like late harvest and when to plant exactly without really relying on meteorological systems that maybe are not up to date?
Maybe I actually see maybe the experience, do you want to tell something about the experience in Bolivia from Prosuco? Maybe that's, yeah. Or yeah.
You repeat the.
But maybe or the other or anything else that you want to, because I think Bolivia has some good examples of that. No?
Well, I'm not sure if I understood well, but you know, in my institution, we are trying to, and I was about to ask that also, if we want to really integrate indigenous knowledge and Western science. It's the first time that I hear what you said, that modeling itself could be even lower in precision than indigenous provisions. And that's what we do we're doing in my institutions, trying to test what are the drivers for indigenous observations. I mean, we don't only collect it, but try to explain why farmers used to have this or to observe this, and how can we use this information. And it's the same in soils and soil management, because what we found is the same as you said. Last year, for instance, the CIF and the International Center for the El Niño Observation had much less accuracy than farmers' observations. But the farmers' observations do not work on their own. I mean, they don't just look to the sky and say, well, this is gonna be a nice year. It happens because of something. Flowers bloom because of something, and animals do have some behavior because there's an atmospheric condition which is happening, which we know it's teleconnections could be, but that's our role, I think, as a scientist. So sometimes it's, I feel that indigenous knowledge is mostly collected as a descriptive knowledge, but not as a valid scientific knowledge, just from other way of thinking. So we have these different projects back there in Bolivia, and not only using, let's say, the knowledge, but collecting from farmers. We have different type of spreadsheets, and we are going back of what they observed and what happened 2 months, 3 months before, what was the driver for this expression. And we have very good correlation so far. We already proved the accuracy, but we want to know why, because then farmers will also take this as a valid. But what we found also is that youth do not believe on this knowledge, because they feel it's just ancient, and yeah, okay, it's not valid anymore. And that's the other thing that we want to show, that it's valid from the other side. So yeah, that's what we do, and we're working in some partners and some common pools with Steph. Thank you.
From the research point of view, there is another science program of climate action with whom we'll collaborate also to improve the delivery of climate services. I think we have run out of time, and I would like to thank the organizers and the facilitators of this very exciting event. I would like to thank you all for being here for such a good time, and don't want to take more time between us and the lunch. Simone.
Yes. Thank you. So we're starting the closure of this session. I find it amazing that you stood with us, that you engaged with us for all these hours. We are very thrilled. And we have, and I must apologize, I lost your little bio I had on my phone. We have a representative of a farmer organization who has been engaging with the CGIAR for a while, and we invited her to give some closing remarks. You want to come over?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Grace Gitu. I'm a small-scale farmer. And I also lead a small grassroots farmer organization called Africa Farmers Needs at Farm Level Initiative. Now, yes, so I think that is just what she could not say about me. Now, what I can see is that I've listened to what you are saying, especially, and I want to make it like a summary for the whole week, because I've been moving around a lot of exhibitions and speeches or talking in most of your presentations. And I'm happy that I'm here talking about landscape.
Down because it's so loud.
Oh.
No, not so close.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Farmers don't know so much of this. I don't have a presentation, but I'll talk about a few points that I've taken from your presentations. First of all, on landscape, the reason we are here, we all know that the farmer existed before science. Isn't that true? So, so the farmer has maintained the landscapes that the science is improving. So they know something. They don't know something that we can share with you. And I'm very happy about the last speakers, because after walking the journeys you have walked by giving us a lot of new products, you have realized that you need the farmer. And I would say that for us to be able to move on together and be able to benefit us as farmers from the science the science work that you are doing, you need to start with us. I was listening to the presenters on what they are doing on the landscape, and I was asking myself, farmers are not uniform, are they? For those who have worked with the farmers, there are those who are using modern farming practices, and those who are still using the traditional farming system. When you are doing your research or when you are doing your data, do you separate them so that the results that you are giving focus on those who are using modern farming? The results must be different from those who are still in the traditional farming. And those who are in the traditional farming are the majority. For those of you who have worked with the farmers, if you have done it, are there farmers in the room? Can you agree with me? Yeah, those who are still using traditional farming are the majority. We have your innovations that are coming in, which are very good, because like now we see that the rat is actually being degraded badly, and we don't know, and it is affecting our food system. And we are when I listen to what you are talking about, I think that we see light. We see like, okay, probably there's a way that we are going to solve this degradation, and it affects all the landscapes. But how are you going to do it if you people you are going to isolate us from what you are doing? Start with us. Let's know that how the farmer maintained those landscapes. I'm talking on behalf of the farmers now, how they maintain those landscapes, and look at what is workable. We start improving on that. Instead of bringing new ideas, can we improve on what was working so that we also adopt it easily because of what we know and move on? I think that is. And then the other thing is that you people, you are very far from us. You do a lot of good work, but how do we reach you? For me, I had to look for you to come to be here. I searched for you. Nobody came to me. I see our county person here. Yeah, how many farmers did you bring? Yeah, eh? No, you are a scientist. Now bring the farmers. No, you see, when the farmers learn this, I'm sure that all your innovations will scale very fast. They will scale very fast because the farmers will share the knowledge with their partners, and they know how to improve on what they have. And probably they will threaten your jobs. Maybe in a short time you go home because you have no work to do. So, but that is not what we want to do. We want to help you scale what you have innovated by involving us. Let us know where you are. In the innovations you are working on, can you simplify the language so that the farmers can understand? If I didn't come here, I wouldn't know a lot of what you are doing. Yeah, put it in a simple language such that if I browse around, me who I'm able to understand and probably share with the farmers. That is one of the challenges you have. I've been listening to a lot of your science work here. It's very complex for an ordinary farmer to understand. Simplify that knowledge, give to the county people, and then the county people, you give the extension people to go. But then now the other challenge is, where are the farmer teachers? They are not there. I was listening to the last speakers talking about the getting the information to the farmers. These people have refused to employ agricultural extension service to come and teach us. Now it's up to the farmer to look for in the information for ourselves. But when I go to your website, for those who are able to reach, you cannot understand. It is so complicated. Can you put it in a simple way that we understand so that we help you to scale? Otherwise, we still continue holding on to our old system because that is what we understand. Yeah, but and then we will continue suffering food insecurity. Now, the other thing is, I've already talked about your locations. Even if I wanted to look for the scientists, how many are you? For example, I'm talking about Kenya. Where are you located? You are very far from the farmers. Why can't you start like what you call centers, where the farmers, even if it is a small room like this one, they put like where farmers can learn, can come today and learn. Those who are not able to come today, they can come the following day, and it will be continuous. I know there used to be farmer schools, but they are now gone, I think, in Kenya. So try and establish centers where the farmers can come and learn your innovations so that we can be able to move on with you. Now, the other thing is, I think I've already talked about you regarding us as passive, that you develop the innovations, then you come and push them through our throats, whether you like it or not. That also affects us, and that is why you find that innovation is low. But if you start with us, yeah, like if you're looking at LAD, for example, the nature-based solutions, the multifunctional, whatever you're calling them. Now, can you start with us, yeah? Those farmers who are older, like my age, and the ones ahead of me, we know a lot. We can tell you how we've maintained those landscapes. Yeah, maybe the practices are outdated, but you can help improve those practices instead of coming with the new ones and putting them through us, because it will not change anything. And that is why things are getting worse and worse. For the people who are developing new, the varieties, I'm happy about the people who are here. Now, you have said it very clearly that you are holding on to our indigenous crops. Why? Because that is what we understand. We have seen some of your innovations that you have brought to us, and they have failed. Along the way, they failed. Why should I trust you again when you bring a new one? So now you have to be very careful what you are bringing to us. Let's start with you so that we understand it and so that we can adopt. But we have seen people come to us and tell us very good stories. We do demos with them, and they are very nice. But when they are gone, those things cannot work. They fail. The other thing, they also introduce more problems. We have seen a lot of pests, a lot of diseases. You all know that when a problem comes into the field, who are the first people to realize? Isn't it the farmers? Yeah, it is the farmers who know that there's a new pest. It is the farmers who realize that the yield are failing. So if you don't involve us, we will not be able to tell you that this one will not work. There is this problem of like, is it called the maize, MLN in maize. Yeah, for the scientists, MLN, maize, okay, fall armyworm, you all know about it. Now, fall armyworm was never with us, but it is here, we cannot solve it. Today, we are told that new varieties have been invented that are resistant to the fall armyworm variety. Correct. But what is the cost of those varieties? They are too expensive. Yeah. Where did those pests come from? Now, again, you also find that now the other people who have started making those chemicals to sell to the farmers. Why do you want the farmer to carry all the risk? Buy very expensive seed, buy very expensive chemicals. Aren't you punishing the farmer? Yeah. Why can't you work with the farmer? It's like you people, you're working for the private sector. Because once you come up with an innovation, you give it to a private sector. The private sector, whatever, multiplies because it does not invent. You multiply the problem or back the problem, the solution, then you start selling it to us. You sell to us a seed, yeah, which is very expensive. We cannot. You sell to us the chemicals to control the problems you have brought. But now, who is taking care of the farmer's risk? Yeah, I carry all the risk. You people, you have developed the variety, you have gotten your rewards, and you are happy. A seed company or a chemical company, you have sold to me the chemical, you have, okay, you have made your business. What of me, the farmer? Yeah, yeah. If that crop does not work, what happens? I bear the risk. I bear the risk as a farmer. So we feel the pain. And that is why you find sometimes adoption of some of these needs are very low. Now, the other thing is that
some of the recommendations you have made, let's say of the landscape, you have told us, you have coming up with very nice solutions of how we can solve the problems. You have nature-based or whatever it is. But we also have our traditional knowledge, and we compare. We don't just adopt, we compare. And we watch and see, if I take this one wholly, it may feel like the other one, or why can't they improve on this one that I have? So the best way to do it is work with us and be able to give you the scaling will be very, very, very easy. Now, the other thing, I don't know whether there are policy people here. Now, you have invented, you have put a lot of science work and given us innovations. These innovations, now once they are ready, they are subjected again to regulations. Yeah. Now the regulations, some of them are not applicable. For example, when you say that I cannot share my seed with my neighbor, and it is a seed that I've been with for all the years, what are you telling me? Yeah. Yeah, what are you telling me? That I cannot share the seed with my neighbor? I've kept this seed all through. Why are you putting a policy to punish us for these policy things? Then you look at, you have talked about landscape. Within a short time, you are told riparian. And that is where, when it is, what do you call it? When, you know, most of us farmers, we depend on rain fed. So during the rainy season, we are upstream. When it comes to, when the rains are gone, we go downstream. So downstream, then we are told that this is riparian land. You should not be farming. You are again taken to court, I don't know what. So those policies, when you are making the policies, let's also look at or first of all, train the farmer, let the farmer know. Let the farmer know that you can do this and you cannot do this. The other thing is market. Now, you have given me a very high yielding product, or you have found like somebody talked of the business model about recycling. Once you have achieved that innovation, or once that one has become successful, it is taken over by now a private sector. Now this private sector will start selling to us that fertilizer. Why can't you train the households so that they can recycle their waste products and make their own fertilizer for their own land? Because now it becomes now a commercial property where the farmers cannot. I suggest the best thing would be to train the trainers, the farmers, how to use what we have to make our own fertilizer. If we scale our land and we cannot meet what we have with what we can produce, then we can go and buy. It is also good to say to encourage the youth to join, because I know most of the youth don't want to come farming and do the manual work. They want easy things to make money and become like the others, drive big cars like the others, which is good. And the youth should be encouraged into agriculture. But for the agriculture that we are putting into the youth must be something that is sustainable. Because I know I worked with some of the youth in our organization, and the youth are not patient. They just say, if I have to spray the tomatoes and wait for 14 days, no. Some of them harvest at night and they take them to the market because they want to make money. But awareness, can you train also the youth? Yeah, these make information available to the people so that they know the danger of giving somebody produce that has chemicals on it. That one is lacking. Then counterfeiting. You make a lot of good innovations, then you leave it to the farmers and to the private sector to give to the farmer. Then counterfeiters come in. They exploit us. Farmers sometimes don't even know. So we are incurring a lot of cost as farmers because of the way you are handling us. We are not ignorant. We know something that we can share with you and work with you and make the scaling of your innovations very fast. Now, I think now the issue of climate change is also another thing that is affecting us so much, because I attended one of the one of the side events, and somebody was saying that by the time climate change affects a plant, it has affected the animals in the soils. Those are the first ones to be affected. So now when you're telling us to address the plants and the animals, the small animals in the soil are already affected, we still not achieve. Why can't you first of all work on that? And I think one of the presenters have also addressed something similar to that. So when you're addressing the climate change, let's be practical, realistic. Let's look at what is workable and what is, if it is the the microorganisms that are in the soil that are affected first before the crop? Can we address that so that you don't address the crop, but still we continue with our practices affecting so whatever is in the soil? Now, digital agriculture is very good, but for people of my age and those ones ahead or behind, digital agriculture is still a challenge to us. Now, can you also help us to become digital like you? We can make like small SMS or WhatsApp messages, at least those ones we can do, because almost everybody has a phone now, so that we can access the information. The CGIARs who are here and the county governments create I attended another side event, we're talking of information management. Create an information targeted for the farmers. And then I see subscribe. A farmer, if you subscribe, you can get that information. Or to run up about chicken, I can get it by just subscribing. If the extension services is low, I can still access the information and share it with my neighbors. So those are some of the things. Then on livestock, I think livestock also you have a lot of challenges, because for the farmers, there is a way that we identify an animal that is good for giving us offspring. Sometimes the men will say that if this bull is very aggressive, it's going to give me strong offspring. So there's a way they identify what is. But now you come and tell us, no, we want to look for herbal animal. That is, so now the farmer is asking, this animal, you know, they are not very ready to go for it because they have their own way of doing it. Now they compare when, for example, if it is for dairy, and they have probably used a bull that is strong, and they believe that it's going to give them a good offspring. Now there's also the problem when you are buying the milk that are produced from those animals, and you are buying it the same price with somebody who has maybe machines who are milking the machines and it doesn't have fat and all that. Then you give us the same price. We feel like there should be a way to categorize, you know, the value, what do you call it? The quality of the produce, so that we don't just tell the same price. If my quality, do the science, find out the milk that is made from an indigenous, that is coming up from an indigenous animal, and the one that is coming from a modern animal, what is the nutrition quality? Yeah, what quality aspect does it have? Because you still find that at the local level, people still want to buy milk from somebody who is having an indigenous goat or cow, and like the one who is using the milk. What are those things that are keeping us there? I was in one of the events where they are talking about gender inclusion, and there's somebody who talked, I think that's a person from Italy. They talked of how they are helping the women or the grassroots community to undertake vaccination of chicken. And I liked it because I said, these ones now are understanding what we go through. Because when you look at it, farmers are not the same. A woman, even if I'm a woman farmer, if you say that you're working with women, we are not the same. Me, probably I have enough time to go for meetings like here, but a young mother who is still maybe newly married or with a cannot come because you're either not given permission or probably you have a lot of house calls to do. So but then the advantage of these young mothers is that they could say they are digital compliant. So if you have that information, these ones who don't have the time to come to these meetings can use the digital services to access. Me, I can come to you because I have the time, but the young ones can access that information using them. I liked that, maybe I don't know how to get her again, so that I can also tell her something else that she can add into that. So I think that is what I needed to say more. I talked about value addition, yes, about the costs, market access, the simple language. I think I've talked about. Thank you very much.
I think you gave us a menu of recommendation that there are people who took notes on their phones of all the quotes and the great things you said. I always want to take photos of your notes to have that all with us. Thank you very much for doing that summary of your impressions. That was really very, very helpful and significant. Oh, I do think we need that, and researchers challenging themselves all the time. So for us, that's what we want to hear. Thank you very much. So again, I just want you to give yourself an applause for this session and your engagement. I want to thank all the speakers really for preparing and doing this with us. So another applause for the speakers. I want us to give an applause to Timothy, who is actually, yes, he's actually a staff from Alliance and Biodiversity and CGIAR, and he's a knowledge sharing specialist, and he agreed to help us with all these technical issues that we call alternative hosts. So really thank you. That's really, really appreciated. Also the technical people in the back who helped us. And then, did I forget somebody? Oh, I want to thank us because we organized this session and we know each other without ever having met at least for 20 years. So it was really nice to do that with you, Christine. And then I want to invite Lulzeget and Jörn. Jörn, here's you. Lulzeget, come. I want you to give an applause to our director and deputy director. So while they are really make us work very hard, they are also really excellent in keeping up the good spirits and the team spirit. And we are very, very thankful for your leadership. And I want you to close the session. Both a little bit.
Both a little bit.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
You know, thank you very, very much. And I mean, admittedly, I mean, you are all doing the great work and the hard work. And so we didn't deserve any applause, I think. Maybe you have a different opinion on that. So thank you very much. And I think the reflection definitely fell on very fertile, ground, the mental ground. And I was just trying to reflect, and I don't want to make it too long, but I think we have seen that we can actually bring the very conceptual high-level thinking around multifunctional landscapes to really concrete work on the ground. And I mean, it couldn't have been said better than to start with a farmer. They have been around much longer than a scientist. That is maybe questionable because we also said that farmers sometimes are better scientists. So maybe they were around the same time. Who knows? Who knows? But definitely starting with the farmer in relation to starting learning their language, sitting down with them, and where there is an opportunity, and you mentioned, a room like this, maybe a community, a village room, or a community or an association, I can guarantee you will be well fed, and it will pay off in the end if you start there and then building up the work that you want to do. Because, I mean, in the end, this is what we want to do. We want to help the people on the ground. We want to work with the people on the ground. And I think this is where we need to start. And then we might go away for some time, but we come back, and that's important. And we need to talk the same language. We might talk other languages sometimes. We talk other languages when we talk to policymakers. We talk other languages when we talk to other scientists. And even within the scientists, we definitely talk different languages sometimes. And so there's a lot to learn, and I think we are embracing that. But I think you have shown incredible resilience, and so I will give the word now to Lulzeget before we then finally go for food.
Okay, thanks. So I think I also want to thank every one of you who participated here, who supported us in every form for some time since we started preparing this. And also for staying this long. I was really afraid that something, lunchtime and too many presentations and so on, you stayed. That shows that your interest, and we are very happy. In the morning, there are good sessions as well, I hope. So there are some questions that I don't need to go back to answer on the energy, on the hydrology, and the ecosystem services, and so on. I think we'll reply to those. We may have a certain community of practice. I don't know how we can engage all of you. So we'll handle those. And in the multifunctional landscapes, more or less, it is about integrating and linking and the connections and so on. So where Simone was asking those questions before about settlers and grazing and so on, so I thought they will bring them together, but we discussed separately So there is a need to negotiate and to have governance and all the things to put together. So that it will happen. I think in wildlife, there are different needs and aspirations and so on. So I don't want to take any longer. Thank you so much again. And I assume we have lunch. So we'll have lunch. I hope, hopefully agroecology and nature positive technology driven lunch with a certificate. Thank you once more. Thanks so much.